Chapter 1381. Although it was a happy thing to have one less strong opponent, the current situation in front of them was still a bit tricky. Lin Jiangdong regained his serious face and reported the rest of the information he had gathered. Lord, we can't be happy too early. His Majesty has sent Xiao Ran to lead 200,000 soldiers to deal with the King of England. As long as they are given some time to reorganize the three armies, hundreds of thousands of soldiers will be sent to deal with the King of England. I'm afraid that even if the King of England is brave and skilled in battle, he won't be able to win. Xiao was not anxious at all. He said faintly, "Do you think the three armies are so easy to reorganize?" "That's true." Lin Jiangdong nodded. "This period of time is enough. If it still doesn't succeed, then we can only blame ourselves for not being as skilled as them." Xiao chuckled, then continued, "Since there are reinforcements on brother's side, then withdraw our people. This king still needs people here." Lord is right. I heard that many of those who led the 100,000 soldiers were brave soldiers who had followed the King of England through fire and water. Lin Jiangdong agreed. When the King of England broke out of the palace, Lord was worried that he would be outnumbered, so he sent people to protect him secretly. Oh, so to say, the generals who had followed the eldest brother have now given up their official positions to follow him? Yes. Xiao's mouth curled up slightly. He was in a very good mood. He couldn't help but say, "Continue to inquire about the news in the palace. If there is any movement, report it to me." Now, it wasn't just one prince who had rebelled. Even the generals who had made great contributions to Xian had abandoned the court. Presumably, Father Emperor was so angry that his liver hurt. Hearing Lord mention the palace, Lin Jiangdong remembered something. His Majesty's health has been unwell recently, and the Emperor's freedom has been restricted. From now on, the palace is under the control of Consort Yu. The informant reported that there has been a change in the imperial physicians in the imperial hospital. The old imperial physician who used to take His Majesty's pulse has retired. This matter sounded unimportant. Xiao quietly pondered for a while, then raised his eyebrows. He raised his hand to touch his chin, then said with a faint smile, "This king is thinking that imperial father's health is not well. As his son, this king should go into the palace to visit. Lord is such a filial person. He should go to His Majesty to show filial piety." Lin Jiangdong followed his words, but his smile was slightly cold. Xiao put down his hand and stood, a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. "Teacher is right. This king should go and see what imperial father, who has been attacked by the recent events, is like now. He was being tortured by hatred. How could the culprit who had caused all this be let off scot-free? He couldn't wait to see what kind of face the person who had been harmed by his own stubbornness would have. Go arrange it. This king will go into the palace tomorrow." Yes. The summer wind rustled through the forest. Flocks of mountain birds occasionally flapped their wings and took flight from the lush foliage. In the boundless plains, soldiers in black armor stood tall like pine trees. They were neatly arranged in rows and were in the middle of training. Their hums were deafening. Not far away, there was a military camp made of tents. In the largest tent, there were soldiers in armor standing or sitting. At this time, they were looking seriously at the person sitting on the main seat. If the officials who had experienced any of the wars in the past 10 years were here, they would find that the famous generals of Xian were all gathered here. Just by sitting there silently, the might of tigers and wolves on their bodies made one's legs tremble involuntarily. They had risked their lives for Sichuan, fought against foreign forces, and stabilized the country. Even if they had outstanding military achievements, they did not show a trace of complacency. They were still in awe of the battle uniform they wore. This was the army of tigers and wolves led by Xiao Su. They were not arrogant in victory or discouraged in defeat. They had once caused the surrounding countries to tremble in fear, and no one dared to challenge their bottom line. At this time, Xiao Su had his back to the crowd. He held a pen in one hand and drew on the map. Right now, we are in this position. The army led by Xiao Ran is 120 li away from us in Li City. Right now, they're not a threat to us. You should lead the soldiers to rest for a few days. We can make plans later. Gao Hao could not sit still when he heard this. Your Highness, at this time, we should strike first to gain the initiative. Master's arrangements are naturally reasonable. Moreover, you have been rushing here day and night from Fuli Mountain, so the soldiers must be very tired. Only after resting will they have the energy to fight. If you want to take revenge for Master, there is plenty of time. Hualing raised his hand to calm Gao Hao and analyzed the situation with him. When everyone heard this, they felt that it was very reasonable. From Fuli Mountain Range to here, it would normally take at least a month, but they did not dare delay. They were afraid that something would happen to the general, so they cut the time in half. When they met up with the general, although their spirits were high, their bodies were already exhausted. All right, you can go and make the arrangements. After Xiao Su gave the order, the generals did not say anything else. They really did need a good rest, so they cupped their hands and left in an orderly manner. Only the cavalry masters of Xiao Lai cavalry were left in the tent. At this time, Ethereal quickly walked in from outside and said to the person at the head, "Master, Water Spirit is back." Everyone revealed happy expressions. Even Xiao Su, who had been tense the entire time, revealed a faint smile. Let her come in and report. As soon as he said this, Water Spirit was helped in by someone. Water Spirit, you're injured? Hualing was shocked. Water Spirit helplessly nodded. It's just an arrow in my left leg. But it's fine. It's already been pulled out. It's just that it's a bit inconvenient for me to walk. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. However, when Water Spirit turned to look at the person at the head, she waved away the subordinates supporting her and knelt down to beg for forgiveness. Master, this subordinate did not follow the plan to receive the young princess. At the time, someone attacked this subordinate's group, and this subordinate was forced to leave to avoid the pursuers. After that, this subordinate lost contact with everyone. This subordinate did not do a good job. Please punish this subordinate, Master. In the Xiao Lai cavalry's code of conduct, no matter what the reason was for their failure, they would not find excuses for themselves. If they did a good job, they did a good job. If they did not do a good job, they did not do a good job. It was because of this strict discipline that the Xiao Lai cavalry became the organization that everyone feared. As soon as Shui Ling returned, she inquired about the whereabouts of the little princess and learned that she had yet to return. So when she faced her master, she felt extremely guilty and couldn't wait to take her sword and slit her throat as an apology. However, when he saw Shui Ling coming alone, Xiao Su's eagerness to see her suddenly cooled. Although he was very disappointed, he knew that Water Spirit had done her best. Leaving the capital this time, it could be said that there were dangers and surprises that exceeded his expectations. Chapter 1382. Xiao Su raised his hand to have someone help Water Spirit up. His expression did not change as he said in a deep voice, Ben Wang knows the situation is critical, so Ben Wang does not blame you. Now is the time to use people. Later, go down and let Ethereal examine your injuries. With just a few words, he reduced his subordinate's guilt and reignited her fighting spirit. This was Xiao Su's way of using people. He was clear about rewards and punishments and knew how to move people's emotions. Water Spirit nodded heavily. Not only did Master not blame her for not finding the little princess, he even assured her that she would not be left behind in the following mission. This made Water Spirit very moved. Without another word, she left with Ethereal. Xiao Su swept his eyes over the people in the tent and waved his hand. You guys can leave as well. He needed to calm down. There was still no news of the little fellow that he was worried about. Although he was anxious, there were still the soldiers and soldiers he followed here. He could not let his emotions affect them. Turin and Hualing looked at their master, who was holding his forehead in loneliness. As long as the little princess was not found, their master would not be able to calm down. It was their fault for losing the little princess. Now that there was no news of her whereabouts, they did not dare to say anything else to add to their master's worries. They tacitly retreated. At this time, on the other side of the mountain, in a corner of the dense forest, a few snow-white figures were jumping around. They held wooden branches or firewood in their mouths and handed them to a handsome young man. Then they began to search around. When they passed by a huge eagle, They glared at it in disdain. It did not do anything and still wanted to eat good food. Shameless. That eagle did not pay attention to them at all. It lowered its head and combed its feathers as if its feathers were the softest outer layer in the world. Feeling the other party's disregard, the snow-white figures almost fought with it. Fortunately, the youth stopped them in time. He stuffed a large piece of roasted meat into their mouths to stop them. The youth was Chu Qingyan. She was speechless as she looked at them, who did not see eye to eye with each other. They would only be united when they were eating or teaching the enemy a lesson. But seeing them rolling around in front of her so happily, she felt incomparably at ease. It would be great if Big Ice Cube was here. She didn't need to do anything. He could make these beasts obedient and not cause trouble. After eating and drinking to its heart's content, Little C shook its wings and flew into the sky. Ever since it started following its master, it had developed a good living habit, which was to digest food after meals. Chu Qingyan was also used to it going out for a stroll. At this time, the most obedient glutinous rice ball rolled on the ground and then rolled into her arms. Stroking its furry head, she couldn't help but ask, "Glutinous rice ball, do you miss His Highness?" Glutinous rice ball whimpered in her arms. Mistress must be thinking of His Highness. In fact, it didn't just miss His Highness. It also missed Old Master and Old Madam. It didn't know when it would be able to see them again. As if they felt their master's longing, Bai Yutong and Xiao Cake also stopped fooling around and came over. They squatted in front of her and shook their heads, licking her fingers and face from time to time, trying to make her happy. These black eyes were filled with concern and comfort for her, making her very touched. She couldn't help but reach out to hug them. "Thank you. Thank you for not leaving me at this time, for protecting me, for comforting me, for giving me someone to rely on, and for giving me the motivation to move forward." As if they knew what their master was thinking, the three of them happily licked her face, smearing her face with saliva. At this moment, a black dot swooped down from the sunset sky, and it kept calling out to him. At first, Chu Qingyan thought that Little C was jealous of these beasts acting spoiled and cute in her arms. But when Little C landed, it didn't even bother to look at Bai Yutong and the others. It kept calling out to her towards the south. Only then did she realize that something was wrong. "What's over there?" Chu Qingyan walked in front of Little C and asked in a low voice. Little C barked a few times and then took out the fluorite cloud from her neck. Chu Qingyan looked down at the fluorite cloud hanging on her chest. This was given to her by the big ice cube on her birthday when she was 10 years old. These days, every time she missed the big ice cube, she would take it out to have a look. At this time, she had a flash of inspiration and stared at Little C in front of her in disbelief. "You found His Highness Trace?" Little C arrogantly glanced at the three beasts next to it, then nodded proudly. She was pleasantly surprised. She hugged Little C's neck and jumped up and down in place. Little C helplessly rolled its eyes, messing up its beautiful feathers. But seeing that its master was so happy, it didn't care about it this time. So with Little C leading the way, Chu Qingyan took Bai Yutong and the others and walked quickly through the forest in the afterglow of the setting sun. When she thought that the big ice cube was on the other side of the mountain, she couldn't suppress her excitement. She raised her qing gong to the extreme and couldn't help but want to see him as soon as possible. The few that were following her sensed her emotions and ran even faster. That feeling of being reunited with her family was too wonderful. Standing at the top of the mountain, it was already time for the sun to set and the moon to rise. When she saw the tents that stretched to the end of the field, Chu Qingyan's eyes filled with tears. She had finally found them. She didn't care about her excitement as she brought the beasts with an unstoppable momentum and flew down from the top of the mountain. Thus, the Earth Spirit and Fire Spirit who were patrolling with their troops saw a few snow-white figures rushing towards them from afar at lightning speed. What made them unable to shift their gazes away was that the person in red at the very front was like a firework approaching them at a rapid speed. They stared in that direction like wooden chickens, completely forgetting to react. "Two sirs, there's an unknown person heading in our direction. Should we shoot?" A small general discovered the enemy in front of them and immediately ran over to report. As soon as his voice fell, 2 chestnuts fell off the small general's head. Hualing fiercely said, "Shoot what? That is Master's treasure. Can you afford to take responsibility?" Turin nodded. "That's right." At this time, Glutinous Rice Ball and the others smelled a familiar scent and brought their master in front of Hualing and Turin. "Long time no see. Where is your master?" "Master is in the stream in front of us," Hualing unconsciously replied. The person who just stepped on the ground turned and quickly flew in the direction Hualing pointed. Her ink-black hair spun in the air as she elegantly left. Bathing. When Hualing finished speaking, there was only air left in front of them. "Two sirs, the general is bathing. Should we send someone to stop that little brother?" That small general received another 2 chestnuts. Hualing took back his hand. "Stop what? That is Master's treasure. Can you afford to take responsibility?" Turin continued to nod in agreement. "That's right." Thus, after receiving the order, the soldiers could only watch as the woman, 3 wolves, and 1 eagle charged into the barracks unimpeded. Then, they could only watch as they disappeared before their eyes once again. Chapter 1383. Along the way, Chu Qingyan clenched her fists tightly. Her heart was thumping furiously. She was about to see the person she was thinking about. How could she not be excited? Little Master must want to give him a pleasant surprise. The others beside her seemed to know what she was thinking. They didn't make a sound as they escorted her forward. There was a stack of clothes on the shore, and there was a faint sound of water splashing coming from a stream. At this moment, Xiao Su was standing in the middle of the stream. His upper body was naked, and he was raising his hand to scrub his chest. In the past few days, he hadn't had a good bath. Now that the situation was still stable, he had time to clean up. In fact, because he missed her too much, he needed cold water to calm down. The leaves rustled, and he heard a small sound coming from the air. He frowned. When he was emptying his mind, it seemed like something had broken in. What kind of guards were Hualing and the others? His sharp eyes looked around the forest and finally locked onto a direction. There was a leaf floating on the water's surface that reached his waist. Xiao Su casually pinched it between his 2 fingers and was about to make a move after questioning it. A slender figure appeared in his field of vision. Under the shadows of the trees, he couldn't see her face clearly, but that familiar feeling that made his blood boil made him stunned. At the same time, 3 snow wolves that were as tall as a person's waist emerged from the grass and stood beside the person. The annoying and familiar cry of the eagle sounded in his ears again. He suddenly opened his eyes wide and stared in disbelief at the figure that suddenly appeared. He couldn't take his eyes off of her. He didn't know when the leaf in his hand had been taken away by the stream. At this moment, he was afraid that everything was just a dream or an illusion. He didn't dare move. He was afraid that if he moved, that person would disappear. Chu Qingyan stood under the tree's shadow, not daring to take a step forward. She came in a hurry and didn't know that her big ice cube was bathing here. If she knew earlier, she wouldn't have run over. But she had been standing here for a while, so why was he still standing in the water without moving? Could it be that he didn't recognize her? Although she was wearing men's clothes, Big Ice Cube had seen her in this disguise before. It was impossible for him to not recognize her. Then why didn't he react at all? Previously, due to her shyness, she didn't dare to look at him. Now that she had waited for a while, the blush on her face faded slightly, and she mustered up the courage to look at him. Under the moonlight, in the sparkling stream, there was a tall and handsome man. His hair was as black as ink, and his facial features were deep and handsome. He had a natural charm, and a drop of water dripped from his chin, along his neck, and to his chest. His abs were even sexier than a bodybuilder's. Under the moonlight, his entire body was like an undulating snowy mountain, making people want to nosebleed. Her face flushed red from the careless glance just now, and she was once again in a hubbub. She originally wanted to return to the tent to wait for him after greeting him, but now she didn't want to do that anymore. With a tap of her foot, she flew towards him like an arrow. Xiao Su was still breathing softly, not daring to approach her. He didn't dare to open his eyes, afraid that she would disappear in an instant. However, He didn't expect that she would suddenly move. Like a ray of red light, she bloomed brilliantly in front of his eyes. Damn it, she seemed to have used too much strength. She originally wanted to jump in front of him, but now she threw herself onto him. The corner of her mouth twitched. Forget it. Let's just make the best of it. Xiao Su didn't know the fierce struggle in her heart. He instinctively opened his arms and caught her. Because of the inertia, he took 2 steps back before he could stand still. The soft and real feeling in his arms impacted his heart. So he wasn't dreaming. The little fellow had really returned to his side. However, before his thoughts could fade, the person in his arms raised her head and held his face without saying a word, sending her fragrant lips forward. The warm and soft lips carried a fragrance that attacked his nerve endings. The wet and slippery little tongue pushed open his teeth and then rampaged in his domain with an impatience that couldn't be ignored. He was only absent-minded for a moment. Although he was surprised by the little fellow's actions, how could he let the beauty down when she was so proactive? He tightened his hands and pulled her into his arms. Kissing her lips, he took the initiative and attacked fiercely. The situation immediately became one-sided. Chu Qingyan didn't care at all. Instead, she did her best to cooperate with him, and their lips and tongues danced together. The two of them had a tacit understanding and couldn't restrain their emotions. She reached out and hugged his neck. Because of her height, she raised her head to bear his attack. Her neck began to ache, and she couldn't help but borrow the buoyancy of the water to spread her legs and hang them around his waist. For a moment, she seemed to feel that his movements were sluggish, but a moment later, he held her but with one hand. His heat penetrated through the soaked, thin clothes. She didn't have time to be startled. The deep kiss swept through like a storm, as if he wanted to tear her apart and eat her up, not giving her the slightest bit of time to breathe. The gurgling, flowing stream, with a gentle touch, passed by the two of them, shaking the light all over their bodies. Between heaven and earth, it formed a scene of its own. However, the two of them, who were tightly pressed against each other, as if they were exquisitely carved by the heavens, were even more dazzling and beautiful than this natural scenery. It was picturesque, and nothing could be more beautiful. The world was quiet, and there were only the two of them. It was as if just like this, they could kiss until the end of time. If it wasn't for the fact that she couldn't breathe, Xiao Su wouldn't have reluctantly left her lips. Her snow-white skin was covered with a layer of rouge, and her red lips were even more vibrant. His eyes couldn't help but become even darker. She opened her eyes. The person she missed day and night was right in front of her. She couldn't help but raise her head and caress his face. Her eyes curved as she spoke of her longing. Big Ice Cube, I missed you so much. In a lover's world, every word, every action was a catalyst for emotions. Xiao Su hugged her even tighter. He lowered his head and pressed against her forehead. He said hoarsely, I missed you too. In the end, he added in a low and hoarse voice, I missed you very much. She couldn't help but curl her lips. The joy and pride in her heart were like overflowing syrup, and she couldn't stop it. Although the weather was still very hot, they were in the mountains after all. Afraid of the cold, Xiao Su buried his head in her shoulder and said, Let's go ashore first. She didn't mind and responded. Then, just as he took a step forward, his body instantly stiffened. However, he quickly adjusted himself and continued to walk towards the shore. Chu Qingyan's face was already red as she buried herself in his embrace. When the two of them were dancing just now, she did not notice the changes in his body. However, now that the two of them were in such silence, how could he hide the changes in his body from her? The two of them were drenched from head to toe. Their summer clothes were thin, and they clung tightly to each other, as if there was no obstruction. She raised her head and looked into the pair of fiery black eyes that were restraining themselves. Her heart was moved, and the thought that flashed through her mind just now became even more firm. Chapter 1384. Why didn't you make a sound when I was standing under the tree for so long? She remembered this matter and couldn't help but poke him and ask in dissatisfaction, causing her to be bitten twice by mosquitoes. Xiao Su laughed softly. I thought I saw an illusion again. It's my fault." Although he said it with a smile, she could clearly feel his deep longing for her from the joy in his words. She couldn't help but hug him and scold him softly with a choked voice. "Idiot, I forgive you." Xiao Su smiled and didn't say anything, but his arms hugged her even tighter. When they reached the shore, he jumped up and landed on the ground, putting her down. He raised his hand, and the clean clothes on the ground flew to him. With a flip of his hand, the clothes were draped over her body. The mountain wind is cold. Chu Qingyan looked down and saw that her entire body was wrapped tightly by him. In contrast, he was wet and standing in front of her with only a pair of trousers. She felt that it was funny and warm. However, she smiled mischievously and reached out to hug him. Her cheek rubbed against his chest, and she smiled coquettishly at him. "Big ice cube, why are you so hot?" He didn't think that the little fellow would suddenly come close to him, especially after those words came out of her cherry mouth. He raised his hands to hold her shoulders and lightly pecked her lips, suppressing his desire to crush her into his body. He only lightly touched her lips and left, for fear that he wouldn't be able to control himself and take her. "Be good, we have to go back." Going back was just an excuse. The most important thing was to calm the fire in his body. She could hear the pain he was suppressing and knew that he didn't want to touch her before they got married because he respected her. She was very touched by his intentions, but she was born in the modern era and only knew that since she had already decided that the other party would be her life partner, then there was no difference whether it was a step earlier or a step later. Xiao Su didn't think that the moment he finished speaking, the person in front of him would come even closer. Her expression was tender and beautiful, every frown and smile, and her eyes were full of hidden feelings. "Big Ice Cube, I want to ask for a gift in advance." She gently blinked at him. "What?" He didn't understand. His entire being was captivated by her enchanting gaze. Just as he was in a daze, she had already thrown herself at him with open arms. This time, the distance was very close. He was caught off guard and was thrown onto the grassy ground. She pressed down on his body, and the loose robe that had been wrapped around them earlier spread out, covering both of them. With the cushioning effect of the grass, he did not feel any pain from the fall. His entire focus was on the person in front of him. He panted lightly, then rubbed her head lovingly. "Stop fooling around. If you want to punish me, you can punish me when we get back." He thought that she was making trouble for him because he didn't recognize her before. Chu Qingyan snorted softly. Her hands wandered around his body. She saw how good his skin was and how lucky she was. "Ian," he called out to her anxiously, his voice hoarse and heavy. Her hands were grabbed by him, but Chu Qingyan did not show any dissatisfaction. Instead, she raised her delicate little face and declared to him in a tone that brooked no argument. "Tonight, I'm going to make you mine." "When have I not?" he blurted out, but his eyes widened in shock, as if he just understood what she meant. However, at this moment, the person who had finished her declaration lowered her head and bit down on his collarbone, leaving an ambiguous bite mark and a pool of sparkling saliva. The tingling sensation could not be compared to the injuries he had received on the battlefield, but made his thoughts stop for Su-E. Ian, the person who had just bitten him, looked at his astonished gaze with sparkling eyes. She pretended to be fierce and said to him, "Big Ice Cube, if you continue to dawdle, this lady will make it so that you won't be able to eat for the rest of your life." As she said that, she angrily bit down on his lips. What a blockhead. Actually, her face was already burning hot. This was the first time in her life that she had forced herself on someone, so she was a bit embarrassed. But the road ahead was treacherous, and she didn't know what unknown dangers would appear. She didn't want to think about the future. She wanted to live in the present. Drink in the morning and enjoy the love in the morning. She didn't want to leave any regrets in the future. Xiao Su tilted his head and avoided her sharp teeth. He looked back at her with a heavy gaze. When she was about to bite him again, his thin lips parted slightly. "You've thought it through?" If she didn't understand him, she would have been deceived by his appearance. She looked into the little flame in his eyes, and her hands seemed to be able to move again. She raised her hand to hug his neck and suddenly said with a smile, "Since your Highness has asked so sincerely, then this concubine will seriously invite you again. With the sky as the blanket and the earth as the bed, how about it? All right, since the princess consort has invited, how can this prince dare to not accept? His gentle and seductive voice brushed past her ear, causing her whole body to tremble and her face to blush to the roots of her ears. However, she was very satisfied with his enlightenment. Just as she was about to proceed to the next step, he suddenly sat up from the ground and pulled her into his embrace. Then, he stood up and quickly rushed into the depths of the forest. In a few breaths, Xiao was already sitting on a thick tree trunk that was as wide as an arm, and she was sitting in his embrace. She looked around and was a bit surprised. How did you find such an excellent place? It seemed to be the size of a small bed. However, her chest suddenly felt cold and the clothes on her body disappeared. She blinked and forgot to react. Xiao waved his hand, and the two's clothes hung on the tree branches. The large robes fell down like a bed curtain, completely covering the two of them. Although this ancient tree was lush, the two of them were at the top, and the outside of the forest was heavily guarded. Without his orders, no one dared to step in. However, he only wanted her to belong to him. Even the birds in the mountains did not want them to take a second look at her. The leaves were dense, and only the moonlight shone in. But when the clothes were taken off, the light was replaced by the stars on her neck. Xiao reached out to take the fluorite cloud and casually placed it in a hole to the side. In this small world, it was as bright as day. His gaze swept across her milk-like skin, and the sparks in his inky eyes gradually ignited. I didn't think it would be used at this time. After he finished speaking, he leaned over and covered her. His long hand scooped her into his embrace, and there was almost no gap between them. She wanted to say something, but he had already blocked all her words. The light shone through the high and low covering clothes and reflected their overlapping figures on top of each other, moving up and down ambiguously. He could faintly hear a soft and charming voice protesting with dissatisfaction. I want to be on top. Okay. Then there were all kinds of indescribable sounds and images. Under the tall tree, by Yutong, Snowflake Cake, and Glutinous Rice Ball each occupied a position. Their eyes were like torches and they were vigilant, guarding their master. And in the sky, Xiao narrowed his eyes and looked around, not letting any suspicious creatures go. Tonight, they wouldn't let anyone or anything disturb their master and his highness. Chapter 1385. When he gave her the stars, he only wanted to light up her future path. He didn't expect that it would light up their future together. At that time, he never thought that his life with this little fellow would be intertwined, and he didn't want to separate. Just like when he wanted to send her away, his side was like a tiger's den. He never thought that he would have the time and ability to protect her until she reached marriageable age. It was just that she was much braver than he thought, and much more determined. Once she grabbed his hand, she was never willing to let go. As for his shaky thoughts, they were completely crushed by her sincere and dependent eyes. Now, he was very glad that he didn't push her away at that time. He let her peacefully grow in his world, and in the end, she took over his entire heart. At this time, he touched her face, sucked on her bright red lips, and gave the final blow to the two of them. The delicate person finally couldn't take it anymore and fainted. He lay on top of her for a moment, and the air was filled with an ambiguous atmosphere. He hooked his lips, got up, and kissed her lips. Then he wrapped the clean clothes on the tree trunk around her body. Finally, he took her into his arms, carefully protecting her as if he was holding a rare treasure. Actually, she was the apple of his eye. When they were entangled together, he had already checked her body. She wasn't injured, so his hanging heart finally relaxed. They hadn't seen each other for nearly half a month, so he didn't have time to take a good look at her appearance. Now, he used the light of the fluorite cloud to look at her face, greedily using his eyes to trace every inch of her skin. No wonder the ancients said that an inch of lovesickness leads to an inch of ash. Before she returned to him, he only felt the torment in his heart. But at this moment, the person he missed was in his arms, quiet and obedient like a kitten. He felt that he suddenly had the entire world from nothing. This feeling was strange and made him greedy. Imperial Father was wrong. It wasn't that he felt satisfied when he sat on the world, but when he hugged the person he loved, he felt that his life was truly complete. When his fingertips touched that smooth jade skin, he almost couldn't control himself. His emotions were like a tide, and he couldn't help but cover the delicate petals again. Chu Qingyan was awakened by a kiss. To be more precise, she was awakened by holding it in. She opened her eyes and was a little confused. She didn't know what day it was. However, she didn't know that her half-asleep and half-awake appearance was an irresistible and fatal attraction to a man who had just had his first taste. And Xiao Su did the same. Thus, as soon as she woke up, she saw a handsome face magnified in front of her eyes, and then took away her breath in minutes. The previous round had already consumed more than half of her strength, and now she had no strength to push him away. She could only use her remaining strength to wrap her arms around his neck, and then let him turn her over and over like this. Sure enough, the evils brought upon themselves were the hardest to bear. She just wanted him to truly become her man, and she didn't want to have any regrets in life. However, she had underestimated his battle prowess. How could a person who could single-handedly fight against dozens of fierce cavalry without taking a breath for an entire morning be satisfied with just a meal of meat? A person who had tasted the word love for the first time would want more. Once he got entangled with her, he wasn't willing to stop. Perhaps it was because the two of them had been separated for too long and too many things had happened during this time. But everything had already spiraled out of control. Facing his subordinates, he could only suppress his inner emotions. Now, the person in front of him made him completely relaxed. There were thousands of words in his heart, but they were all put into action. The more strength he used to squeeze her into his body, the more intense his love was, and the more affectionate the words he wanted to say. At this time, silence spoke louder than words. Chu Qingyan was floating in the vast sea. Although he didn't say anything, and she didn't ask, the moment they met each other's eyes, she already knew how much pain he was suppressing in his heart. That was why she allowed him to do whatever he wanted when he couldn't stop himself from doing what he wanted. But in the end, she couldn't help but want to beg for mercy. He stretched out his arm and pulled her into his embrace. Leaning close to her ear, he smiled naughtily. Who was the one who said she wanted to be on top? How about this king satisfy you? She immediately retreated. What kind of joke was this? Just last time, she had almost broken her waist. It wasn't that she was too weak, but that this one in her family was too fierce. She couldn't endure it. However, the sky and earth spun. When she opened her eyes again, she wanted to cry, but had no tears. This concubine can't do it. Before she finished speaking, she couldn't help but let out a series of low gasps. She didn't even have time to complain in her heart, because her body and mind were completely occupied by him. Her back was still covered with the clothes he had put on before. At this time, it hung down, covering their naked bodies, one sitting and one lying down. In front of her eyes were bewitching eyes, looking at her passionately. It was like a ship's lantern on the sea, swaying in the wind. At this time, she tried her best to concentrate, but in the end, she could only follow the swaying black hair and fall into the undulating waves. Until the very end, she felt sweat dripping down. A sentence flashed through her mind. No wonder old friends used the phrase the joy of fish and water to describe this kind of love. His blood was boiling and his body was full of energy, but he had been restraining his movements. The little fellow was like a delicate flower that needed to be carefully protected and treated with gentleness. A night of fragrant wind messing up the branches, 5 slender fingers reaching the ends of her hair. Low eyebrows and gentle smiles, little sparks burning in his eyes. Light and slow twirling, gentle and soft, charming eyes like silk flowers. A garden full of colors, but not as delicate as a wife's cheeks. The night wind blew, the forest insects chirped, the mountain streams flowed, the moonlight shrouding the beautiful scenery. The entire mountain gradually fell into a deep sleep under the hazy moonlight. Only the wolf that had been hungry for a long time wanting to taste the marrow again and again, not knowing how to be satisfied. From the moon on the treetops to the dawn, she didn't want to recall what she had experienced. At this moment, she just wanted to have a good sleep. After exercising for a whole night, her body was sticky. Xiao Su carried her and jumped into the stream to wash her carefully. During the process, he couldn't help but have sex with her once more. After that, he simply cleaned himself up and then returned to the temporary small cloth house. At this time, Chu Qingyan didn't even have the strength to roll her eyes at him. After eating for so long, he should have eaten enough. Why was he still staring at her so hungrily? Xiao Su gently took her into his arms and patted her back to coax her to sleep. She had been on the road for days, so she must be tired. He also tossed her around for an entire night. He also knew that he had asked too much, but he didn't regret it. He only felt that their hearts had never been so close. But tomorrow morning, he had to admit his mistake. The last time he made the little fellow cry. For the next benefit, his attitude must be sincere. Chu Qingyan didn't know that the person in front of her was so two-faced and deceitful. After she fell asleep, he also leaned against the tree trunk and closed his eyes to rest. But his hand holding her tightly did not loosen. If there was a first time, there would be a second time. Since he had already started eating, he didn't need to be afraid that he wouldn't be able to eat it again. For this undefeated god of war, tonight's night was more beautiful than any night he had spent before. It was simply incomparably beautiful. Chapter 1386. Achoo! Hualing gave a heavy sneeze and woke up with a start. His neck felt uncomfortable when he moved, so he couldn't help reaching out to rub his shoulders and neck. Then he gave a yawn and looked at the forest not far away, asking the person beside him with a puzzled expression. Master and the little princess have been by the stream for an entire night. Why haven't they come out yet? Turin bit a blade of grass and was currently looking at the sunrise on the horizon with narrowed eyes. The bright red gradually dyed the white clouds in the sky, making people feel awe towards this world. Hearing Hualing's words, he casually replied, "It wasn't easy for the two of them to reunite, so they naturally have a lot to talk about. Why are you worrying so much for? If you have the time, why don't you go and check on the soldiers' training?" Hualing gave a soft snort, saying it like he was the only one curious. "Then what are you doing here with me? Aren't you the same as me?" Turin lightly looked at him. "I'm watching the sunrise. Only a ghost would believe you. When did this person understand such poetic things?" Hualing gave a snort. Before Turin's chestnut fell, he suddenly opened his eyes wide and pointed forward for Turin to see. "Isn't that Bai Yutong? What is it doing?" Turin looked in the direction Hualing was pointing and saw Bai Yutong sniffing here and there. Then it looked in a direction and ran over while snorting. The two of them looked at each other. Wasn't that the tent their master was living in? While they were feeling suspicious, Bai Yutong had already come out of the tent with a stack of clothes on its head. At this time, Bai Yutong seemed to feel their gazes on it. It turned its head to look at the two of them and gave a whimper. Then it quickly went back the way it came. At this time, the small general ran over and said while panting, "Lord's tent has been stolen. Should this general chase after the thief?" There were witnesses and evidence, so the two sirs wouldn't reward him with chestnuts, right? However, the two sirs ignored him. Hualing rubbed his chin and said with a bit of surprise, "Just now, I seem to have seen the grievance in Bai Yutong's eyes, as if it was complaining. This is the first time I've seen it like this. It's really fresh. Could it be that my eyes are playing tricks on me?" "No, you are not alone," Turin said calmly. As a result, the general was once again left out in the cold. The morning dew in the mountain forest was heavy, and the wind blowing was also cold. Chu Qingyan woke up to a gust of morning wind, but she did not feel cold because someone was already helping her dress. Her whole body was sore and weak, and she was too lazy to move. She just watched in a half-awake state as the person in front of her seriously helped her put on her clothes and seriously took advantage of her. She didn't even have the strength to roll her eyes, but she couldn't stop the flush on her face. After slowly helping her put on her belt, Xiao Su quickly put on his clothes. At this time, Chu Qingyan looked down at her own clothes. She had brought them from her bag, but she remembered that his clothes had already been ruined by them last night. How did he still have clothes? Seeing that her gaze had been on him for a long time, Xiao Su quickly understood. He tidied up his clothes and hugged her again. Only then did he explain to her, "I'll have Bai Yutong bring them over from the tent." Xiao Su was never polite to the followers who sent him around. At the same time, her sharp eyes picked up a snow-white wolf fur from his shoulder. Then she blew it off and curled her lips at him. "Why didn't you have your people bring them over? I don't want people to disturb our two-people world," he honestly replied. Hearing this, she couldn't help laughing. She raised her hand to poke his chest. When she touched his clothes, she couldn't help missing the elastic abs from last night. After not seeing each other for a few days, your mouth seems to be smeared with honey. You really know how to talk. Do you want to try it? He asked in a low voice by her ear. She immediately became alert and wanted to shake her head, but the other side had already pressed down, not giving her any chance to refute. So the previous question was just a formality. He was already determined to do it. In the end, when the two of them separated, their clothes were already messed up. The sun is about to rise, and you're still messing around? If your subordinates see this, your tall and mighty image will definitely be smashed to pieces. She blushed as she hurriedly tidied up her clothes. During this time, she angrily glared at him a few times. Xiao Su rubbed his nose. He had already seen what he needed to see last night. This little fellow was really too shy. Last night, Ian, you were the one who took the initiative first. He wrapped his arms around her body and leaned his head against her forehead as he complained in a low voice. Her cheeks turned warm as she pulled out his hand from under her clothes. She gave a soft cough and looked at him, who was the one who didn't let go in the end. Although she was the one who took the initiative, there was a large difference between men and women. After she took the first step, she was counterattacked by him. Actually, he was a wolf in sheep's clothing. His mouth said no, 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 but his body was very honest. As if he could feel her silent criticism, he gave a low laugh. His voice echoed in her ears, making her unable to resist it at all. "The princess consort is too delicious. This king can't eat his fill." These words successfully turned her from a pink peach to a red braised crayfish. She gave a shy smile as she gave a soft snort. "I think it's the Lord's appetite that is too big, and this concubine can't feed his fill." After saying this, she suddenly felt like their topic was so dirty. Could it be that after taking that step, she had thrown away her modesty? When he was about to kiss her again, she immediately reached out a finger to stop him. Who knew if he would continue to ask for more? When the little fellow puffed out her cheeks and leaned into his embrace, complaining that her entire body was sore and she couldn't move, Xiao Su knew that he had been a bit too harsh. But this was the first time in his life and the person he doted on the most, so no matter how much he restrained himself, he couldn't completely control himself. After all, when the feelings were deep, he couldn't control himself. He touched her face and promised not to touch her again, letting her rest for a while. She had been drowsy just now, but now that she was really going to sleep, she couldn't fall asleep. She couldn't help grabbing his hand and intertwining her fingers with his. Not only were his fingers slender, the joints were clearly defined, and they were also white. The tips of his fingers were a bit pink, as if they were decorated with flower petals. It was so beautiful that it made people jealous. It was simply infuriating to compare oneself to others. She couldn't help wanting to pull her fingers out. However, the fingers that allowed her to play around suddenly tightened. Their 10 fingers intertwined, not letting her pull away. Feeling the tender affection, she couldn't help curling her lips as he played with her fingers. Pressing her cheek against his chest, she remembered that under the illumination of the fluorite cloud last night, she saw a few more scars on his body. She couldn't help but ask softly, "Big Ice Cube, tell me, how did you get through this period of time? How did you get through it without me?" And then, cough, cough, at everyone's request, I specially added 2 more bowls of sugar. Please kindly accept it. Chapter 1387. Chu Qingyin's mind immediately became alert as she listened to Big Ice Cube's narration of what had happened in the Imperial Palace. She listened to him with a cold expression before speaking again. So this time, Your imperial father really spared no effort in trying to kill you." When she said this, her entire body trembled uncontrollably. It was hard for her to imagine what it would be like for a father to force his own son to drink poison. It was also hard for her to understand how it felt to be forced to die by one's own father. However, she could feel the fear and panic in her heart. She hugged his waist tightly, feeling both angry and fearful. Xiao did not continue speaking. He hugged her trembling body back and said in a half-joking, half-pitiful tone, "What are you afraid of? Aren't I standing in front of you perfectly fine? Besides, I'm fine as the person involved." She sniffled and said in a low voice, "No, I dash in the end." She could not help but cry. Hearing her suppressed sobs, Xiao panicked and pulled her out of his embrace in a fluster. Looking at her watery eyes that could not stop crying, he felt like his heart was about to shatter. It was even worse than when he heard that Imperial Father wanted him to drink the poison wine. "All right, don't cry." He clumsily raised his hand to wipe the tears from her face. It was said that women were made of water. Indeed, it was true. Those tears were like a stream that could not be wiped away. Xiao's heart ached. In the end, he kissed her eyes until she choked and stopped crying. "Sorry, I just thought about what I would do if you drank that cup of poison. I can't live without you." She hung her head and kept rubbing her eyes. She was like a kitten that had been abandoned by the roadside, helpless and lonely. After he heard this, his heart almost melted. He reached out to pull her back into his embrace and comforted her softly. "Silly, I didn't drink it, did I? I'm still here, alive and well in front of you. I will never leave you again, and no one will separate us." "If Duke Cheng, he did not appear to stop your imperial father, what would you do?" She clutched his sleeve tightly, and her voice was tight. Her eyes were filled with tears, as if she would continue to cry if he said that he didn't like her. Even though this matter had already passed, and he was no longer under his father's control, the little fellow was still nervously imagining countless possibilities, afraid that he would leave him in one of them. When he saw the fear in her eyes, he instantly understood what she was afraid of. She was afraid of every possibility of losing him. Even if it was already in the past, she didn't dare to imagine every what-if. Because he loved her so deeply that he couldn't accept any possibility. He couldn't afford to gamble on every if. Not every Chu Qingyan could meet such a big block of ice. Not every Xiao had the chance to meet such a little guy. Because they loved each other, they cared about each other and understood each other's inner thoughts. Xiao couldn't help but soften his expression and soften his voice. He told her that if Duke Cheng he did not appear, how would he escape from this situation? He would never drink the poison wine and leave her. "I originally wanted to use the secret of the Fuli mountain range to keep Imperial Father in suspense so that he wouldn't kill me. However, the appearance of the second-rank prince saved me from my predicament. Now that I've broken out of the palace and joined up with the army, I think that if Imperial Father saw the situation today, he would have taken my life no matter what." After hearing his next move, her emotions gradually calmed down. She only sniffed and tried to smile at him, but in the end, she laughed until tears came out. She buried her head in his chest and said hoarsely, "Big block of ice, I'm so glad that you're still fine. In the future, erase that person from your life." "All right." He tightened his arms and buried his head in her hair. "My parents will treat you as their son. Moreover, you still have me. You are not a child without parents. You still have a group of people who love you. You won't be lonely. And I know that you've always been by my side." The two of them quietly hugged each other as they sat on a branch, admiring the first rays of light from the earth. When the sun leapt over the horizon, the brilliant light enveloped the two of them. In the circle of light, the two of them smiled at each other. Like butterflies breaking out of their cocoons, they were reborn. And under the tree, Xiao and the snowflake cake quietly squatted on the ground. They also looked at the eastern horizon, bathed in the golden light. They were motionless like statues, dignified without being angry. After being lovey-dovey for an entire night and an entire morning, under Chu Qingyan's strong request, Xiao reluctantly brought her to the ground. However, As soon as her feet touched the ground, her legs couldn't help but go weak. Fortunately, she held onto the person beside her, otherwise she would have fallen like a frog. He helped her put on a veil hat, covering her stunning appearance. His little fellow could not be spied on by others. "It's all your fault." She glared at him in annoyance. If it wasn't for him not knowing how to control himself, how could she not even have the strength to stand? She had just steadied herself when she fell into Xiao Su's embrace. She cried out in alarm. "We can't do this." If she appeared in front of his soldiers like this, how embarrassing would that be? "Didn't you just say that it was my fault? I, Xiao Su, will take responsibility for my own actions. So now I'm atoning for my mistakes." He carried her and walked toward the outside of the forest. "Hey, let me down. You're a general. Carrying a lady like this, where's the propriety?" She was really afraid that his dignified image would be ruined because of her. In ancient times, women were not allowed to follow the army. But her family's big ice block, carrying her into the camp openly like this, she didn't care, but she was afraid that this would affect the soldiers' morale. Moreover, it was at this crucial moment. Whether or not it would cause a commotion, she had to eliminate this possibility. Big Ice Block had always been used to doing things his own way. He could ignore it, but she could not consider it for him. "You are my woman, my wife for life," he said resolutely. This was his person, so what was there to be afraid of others saying? But the person in his embrace struggled fiercely. His heart ached that she was so tired last night, so he could only give in. But no matter what, he had to carry her to the edge of the forest before he was willing to let her go. Knowing that this was already the biggest concession he could make, she readily agreed. When they reached the edge of the forest, under her insistence, he finally put her down. "You're just thinking too much." He shook his head and helplessly rubbed her face in a pampering manner. She knew that he would always compromise for her, but she was very happy that he could take care of her emotions. She couldn't help but stand on her tiptoes and place a kiss on his face, a reward for being obedient today. Then when a flame appeared in his eyes and he reached out to grab her, she nimbly dodged and brought the four of them behind him. He heard her call out in surprise and joy. "Turin, fire spirit, water spirit, ethereal, wood spirit, Genex, and you're all here." Chapter 1388. His subordinates were all waiting here. Xiao Su's eyes couldn't help but twitch. As expected, the world of two people was quieter. In the end, he took a deep breath before turning around to face everyone. When Huo Ling and the others saw their master turn around, they immediately felt a cold aura wrap around their backs. If it was any other time, they would have run away, but little Wang Fei had finally come back. They would rather have their master's cold face than say a few words to little Wang Fei. Xiao Su coldly swept his eyes over them, but they had the little fellow as their backing, so they weren't afraid of him. He couldn't help but feel helpless and amused. The scene was very lively right now, with people talking one after another. There was no place for Xiao Su to step in at all. However, he didn't speak much in front of his subordinates, so he was reduced to staring at Bai Yu Tang on the side. It was a pity that Bai Yu Tang was still thinking about how he had threatened her to be treated as a thief when she went to get her clothes, so she pointed the condom at him. And Xiao Hai took the chance to laugh at him for having such a day. So while that side was chatting passionately, this side was as silent as ice. Chu Qingyan saw out of the corner of her eyes that Big Ice Cube was fighting a battle of wits and bravery with the others. She felt it was interesting. At this time, Turin suddenly knelt down and she jumped in fright. "Little Wang Fei, it's been hard on you. It's this subordinate's fault for not being able to protect you, causing you to suffer so much." When Turin finished speaking, before she could help him up, Water Spirit knelt down again. "Little Wang Fei, this subordinate is also wrong. Please punish this subordinate for not being able to help you." Ethereal also knelt down. His reason was that he had been separated in front of the prison and hadn't been able to stay by her side to protect her. Then Huo Ling, Mu Ling, and even Jean Xian knelt down. Their reasons were even more varied. What was it that they didn't take good care of their master and caused him to be injured? Looking at the people kneeling on the ground, Chu Qingyan felt helpless. She couldn't help turning to look at the person beside her. Why did they have to apologize to her even for something that hurt big, Ice Cube? Xiao Su took a step back and continued to tease them. It was obvious that he didn't want to get involved and wanted her to solve it herself. He did not punish Turin and Water Spirit because he wanted her to deal with them herself when she came back. This was an opportunity he created for her to establish her authority. Now that the situation was different, he needed her to have the same authority as him so that she could be protected when he was not around. Forget it. This person wants to be a hands-off shopkeeper. Chu Qingyan shook her head in her heart and then helped the people kneeling on the ground up one by one. The most important thing is that you can stand in front of me alive. She walked up to Turin, Ethereal, and Water Spirit and said sincerely, "Thank goodness you're safe and sound. Otherwise, I wouldn't know how to explain it to your master. I can't let you get hurt or even lose your lives because of me." The inner demon that had been haunting him for the past few days was finally gone. Su Jian was right. If there were flowers to be plucked, they should be plucked. If there were no flowers, they would only be broken branches. Even if they had been the fierce cavalry for a long time and their temperaments had been tempered to iron, when they met Chu Qingyan's gentle gaze, they couldn't help but turn soft. In the past, they were in awe of her because of their master, but now there was an indescribable feeling added to it. It could be said that it was brotherly love. After everyone exchanged greetings, Xiao Su walked back to her side and lightly said, "Are you all very free?" Huo Ling and the others trembled when they heard this and shook their heads in unison. This subordinate wants to go inspect the camp. This subordinate wants to discuss the nearby terrain with the generals. This subordinate just remembered that there are some herbs that haven't been classified yet. In an instant, everyone scattered. Big Ice Cube, you scared everyone away. Chu Qingyan put down the veil on her hat again and raised her eyebrows as she spoke to him. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. They're just feeling guilty. She couldn't help shaking her head with a smile. "Let's go. I'll show you around my camp." Xiao Su pulled her hand and walked forward. She had told him not to be too intimate with her in public, but no matter what she said, he didn't listen. It seemed that ever since they met again after their separation, Big Ice Cube couldn't wait to take her with him all the time. Perhaps he was afraid of worrying about her safety during this period of time, so she could only empathize with him and go along with his wishes. Jean Xin followed behind the two of them. He felt like he was the same as Xiao Hai and the others, being completely ignored by his master. Sure enough, that girl Xining was right. As long as His Highness was there, his master's eyes would accept him. There was no other person or matter. Along the way, Chu Qingyan was stared at by the soldiers passing by. It seemed like everyone was trying to guess her identity, but because of the presence of the person beside her, they only dared to sneak glances at her. Then they would wait until they were out of sight before whispering to each other. "It's all your fault." She gave a snort. "Why is it my fault again?" This time he was a bit confused. "I'm already wearing men's clothes, and you're still holding on to me. People will think you're gay." When she said this, she successfully felt his body stiffen, and she couldn't help shaking her head. Although the soldiers would find out her identity sooner or later, right now, they didn't know she was a woman, so it was normal for them to think in that direction. "I really should put a line on your body. You are this king's woman," Xiao Su softly said. She couldn't help smiling. So the Big Ice Cube also had such a cute side. It really was rare. He lifted the curtain and entered the tent. The furnishings inside were clearly visible to him. There was a bed, a desk, a tea table, and chairs. Although it was simple, this was how armies were supposed to be in battle, so it was already pretty good to have it. "I'll have someone prepare some food for you. Eat a bit first. I have something I need your help with later." After pouring a cup of water for her, Xiao Su directly spoke. Chu Qingyan took the cup and looked at him when she heard this. "It can't be. I just got here, and you already have something for me to do? Even enslaving people isn't like this. No wonder Turin and the others are so afraid of you. You must have exploited them like this." Hearing her pretend to complain, Xiao Su pinched her face in amusement. "I'm asking you to help me interrogate someone so that you can familiarize yourself with the current situation as soon as possible. Otherwise, when you go blind, Don't blame me for not letting you participate in anything. All right, all right. I'm just joking with you. I'm not afraid of trouble. I'm just afraid that you won't let me participate. She snatched her pitiful face from his hand, then asked with bright eyes, "What is it? Tell me what's going on first." Facing her coquettish behavior, he couldn't do anything about it. He pulled her to sit down, then said, "This matter is related to Lonnie. She's third Imperial Brother's person." "What?" Chu Qingyin's eyes opened wide. Before, Hong Yi, Cheng Yi, and Huang Yi were all other people's informants. Now that there was another one, she couldn't help pursing her lips as she said, "Why do you always bring back a bunch of people with different backgrounds?" Xiao Su was helpless. "That's why I'm asking the princess consort to help this king clean up the troops and see if there are any hidden spies. If this is this minister's first task after taking office, then this minister's concubine will not refuse." She cupped her hands in response. Xiao Su couldn't help but smile at her mischievous appearance. Chapter 1389. The woman in front of him was radiant and charming. For Xiao Su, who had just tasted meat, it was like he was addicted to it. There was no one else around. Xiao Su's mind moved, and his body moved faster than his mind. He reached out and pulled the person who was looking at the tent, unaware, into his arms. The beauty's soft figure ignited a fire in his eyes. His hands tightened around her waist, and he was about to bite her red lips. Chu Qingyin didn't expect him to do this. She was about to push him away because there were soldiers guarding outside, but when she met his passionate eyes, her heart softened. She changed her hand from his chest to his neck and closed her eyes shyly. The little fellow's obedience made the heat in his eyes rise to another level. However, when their lips were about to touch, a loud voice sounded from outside the tent. "Son-in-law, son-in-law, father heard that Kai Kai is back. Where is she? Where is she?" As soon as he finished speaking, the curtain was lifted and Chu Machen's father bounced into the tent. He seemed to have seen the pink air in the tent suddenly vanish. He patted his head, thinking that his eyes might be playing tricks on him. Thinking of his daughter, he immediately looked up. The two of them had their backs to him and were quite a distance away. Just as he was about to call them, the two of them turned around at the same time. One of them was extremely cold and cheerless, while the other called out to him with a sweet smile, "Father, your daughter is back." If Father Chu was more astute, he would have noticed the unnatural blush on their faces. Father Chu's eyes lit up, and he immediately ran over. "My poor Kai Kai. Father missed you so much. Daughter missed you too." Chu Qingyin held her father's hand and responded with tears in her eyes. Who knew that the smile on Father Chu's face would disappear, and he would pout so hard that a wine bottle could be hung from his mouth. "Liar. If you missed me, you wouldn't have stayed with son-in-law for so long. You would have come to find me long ago." On the way here, he heard Black Impermanence say that Kai Kai came back last night. How despicable. He only found out now that Kai Kai didn't love him anymore. When Xiao Su heard this, his bad mood from being interrupted suddenly calmed down. Father stomped his feet and threw a tantrum as soon as he came back. What should he do? Usually, it was Big Ice Cube who helped to adjust the temperature. Chu Qingyin immediately asked for his help, but she didn't expect him to stand aside and watch coldly with his arms crossed. He didn't look like he was going to help at all, and he even looked like he was on par with her father. 3 black lines instantly appeared on her forehead. Why were these two people becoming more and more backward as they lived? At this moment, Chu Qingyin's mother appeared and saved the day. Chu Qingyin rushed to her savior and said, "Mother, you're here. Kai Kai misses you so much." Mrs. Chu looked her up and down lovingly. Seeing that she was fine, she put her hand on her head and rubbed it gently. "It's good that you're fine. Being safe is a blessing." Xiao Su and Mr. Chu looked at each other. They had both lost. Xining quickly served breakfast, and the family talked about what they had seen and heard in the past few days while eating. Xiao Su didn't show up last night, and he was delayed in the morning, so he quickly finished breakfast and left Hualing to Chu Qingyan. Then he went out to train the soldiers. After hearing about what happened to her daughter, Mrs. Chu couldn't help but wipe her tears. Thank God you came back safely. If something happened to you, what would I do?" When Mr. Chu saw his wife crying, he immediately glared at his daughter in front of him. "It's all your fault." Chu Qingyan could only nod and admit her mistake. After eating and comforting the two old children, Chu Qingyan called Xining and Jean Xian in front of her and asked about what happened on the way. Then, she asked Xining to send her parents back and ordered Hualing to bring Lonnie in. Since Big Ice Cube said so, she would solve this matter first. Knowing that her daughter had something to do, Mrs. Chu persuaded her husband to leave. Mr. Chu was a little unhappy that his daughter had been taken away by someone else as soon as she came back, but Dan Yang told him to look at the big picture, so he reluctantly left with Xining. But before he left, he hesitated and said, "Kai Kai, Lon Yi is very obedient. She even made candy for father to eat. She's not a bad person. If she did something wrong, don't hit her too hard. Don't break her." Chu Qingyan was thinking about this and didn't expect her father to say this. It was rare for her father to plead for someone. While she was lost in thought, her father and mother had already left. Forget it, she would talk about it when she saw them. Soon, Lon Yi was brought in. Although she was wearing a simple blue dress without any decorations, her temperament was otherworldly. Her facial features were dignified and beautiful. When she walked in, it was as if she was a beautiful woman walking out of the smoke. She always knew that the 7 maids were all beauties with different temperaments. Hong Yi, Cheng Yi, and Huang Yi were all beauties. It was just that she didn't have much contact with them, especially the ones after LVE. Because Lon Yi was only in charge of the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone, she rarely appeared, so she didn't have a deep impression of her. But now that she saw her, she would never forget such an outstanding beauty. Lonnie greets the princess consort. Lonnie stood in the center and bowed with a smile. Her etiquette was perfect, and there was no problem. Chu Qingyan knew that Lon Yi had saved her father and the others, which was why they were able to leave the city safely. Thus, Chu Qingyan did not want to make things difficult for her. She went straight to the point and asked, "Lon Yi, you are a smart person. You should know why I called you here, right?" Lon Yi calmly nodded and then knelt down. She respectfully answered, "This servant knows. This servant is not an orphan. This servant is one of Prince Yi's people. Many years ago, this servant was sent to His Royal Highness on a mission. Although I am in the King of England's manor, I am actually working for Prince Yi." It was rare to see someone so cooperative. Chu Qingyan and Hualing looked at each other and secretly nodded. Then they turned to look at the person kneeling on the ground. "As far as I know, Prince Yi has always been against His Highness. Why didn't you expose him at the city gate and save everyone instead?" This was something that she and Big Ice Cube couldn't understand. He was clearly an enemy, so why did he help them in the end? Lon Yi revealed an expression other than a smile when she heard this. She blankly shook her head. This servant doesn't know. Not long after the princess consort entered the palace, this servant received an order from my master to protect the people in the King of England's manor. No matter what the cost, even if he had to use his secret forces, he wouldn't hesitate. When these words came out, everyone present was shocked. Chu Qingyan was even more confused. The person who used a chase after you suddenly changed his personality and didn't hit you when you were down. Instead, he helped you when you were down. She really couldn't understand what this Xiao Ho was thinking. At this time, Lonnie took out a letter from her chest. This was given to this servant by my master. He told me that if His Highness asked, I should give this letter to His Highness. His Highness will understand after reading the letter. At this time, Hualing had already taken the letter and passed it to Chu Qingyan. Chapter 1390. When Xiao Su received the news from Hualing and rushed back, he saw little Hai and glutinous rice ball sitting at the tea table as soon as he opened the curtain. When the little fellow wasn't here, this was just a temporary place for him to rest. He never thought that this cold and cheerless tent would have a warm side to it. Perhaps a place with a loved one was home. Even if he had to wander in the future, he could still call the world his home as long as she was by his side. He couldn't help slowing down his steps as he walked in. When he came in, Chu Qingyan had already noticed him. She pointed at the table, indicating for him to look at the letter. Xiao Su didn't think too much as he walked over. When he picked it up, he found that it was still sealed. He couldn't help looking at the person who was currently tickling glutinous rice ball, and his lips couldn't help revealing a gentle smile. She was always so considerate. She never touched anything that others gave him, especially when it came to secrets. She would always let him look over it first. You don't need to be so sensible. What's mine is yours. He raised his hand to touch her face. I know, because you'll always let me see it in the end. She slyly grinned at him. Xiao Su chuckled and then opened the envelope. He took out the letter and carefully read it. She saw Xiao Su's mood change from relaxed to frowning and then to disappointment before he finally closed the letter. Although she had been playing with glutinous rice ball, Chu Qingyan still paid close attention to him. It was rare to see his mood change so complicated, so she couldn't help moving over. What did Xiao Ho write that made you so emotional? Take a look for yourself. She took the letter and immediately opened it to read. Her expression changed a lot, and it was even more obvious than Xiao Su's. Her lips twitched as she said in disbelief, "So, he was only targeting you because he mistakenly thought that your mother was the one who framed his mother's family. So he has a grudge with you? Now the truth is out. Your father worked with the right prime minister to frame the Luo family, causing Luo Fei to die with hatred." That's right. Xiao Su rubbed his eyes. Previously, he had thought that his third brother had targeted him because of his identity as the eldest son of the first prince. He had never thought that it was because of this reason. If they had talked things out earlier, they would not have fought for so long. Chu Qingyan quickly accepted this matter, and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Your imperial father is indeed an incapable ruler who can't distinguish between loyalty and treachery. He can even abandon his own son, and can even humiliate and kill his own old officials. Is there anything in this world that he won't do? Kidnapping a woman from a good family. What difference is there between him and a bandit? After this incident, Xiao Su was even more disappointed in his father. He shook his head. It seems that after so many years, this isn't the only thing he has done. What he did to you is unforgivable. Chu Qingyan took a deep breath and then calmed down. She asked, "What do you think of Prince Yi's proposal?" The two of them had no doubts about Xiao Ho's words. During this escape, without his secret help, it would have been very difficult for them to smoothly meet up with the army. Xiao Su recalled the conversation with Xiao Ho before they left the palace. Xiao Ho had personally promised that he would not attack him again. Xiao Su was even more convinced of Xiao Ho's words. What do you think? Xiao Su collected his thoughts and did not answer. Instead, he threw the question back to her. His eyes sparkled with encouragement. Chu Qingyan nodded without hesitation. Cooperation. Cooperation, of course. He is inside, and you are outside. With his help, we will have a smoother time. Otherwise, with Xiao Ran and the three armies in his hands, even if we are celestial soldiers and generals, it will be difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. The little fellow's words were exactly what he wanted. He raised his hand and pinched her face. Okay, we will do as you say. Soon, Lan Yi was brought in again. Seeing the relaxed expressions of the two, Lan Yi was puzzled, but she immediately knelt down and saluted. Lan Yi, you should be able to contact Prince Yi's people. Tell them that His Highness has agreed to everything he said. If there is anything in the future, they can contact him at any time. Chu Qingyan said directly. Lan Yi's face lit up. Yes, I will do as you say. But soon, she bowed down and apologized. Lan Yi has concealed her identity for more than 10 years. During this period, Lan Yi has delivered a lot of information for Prince Yi. Lan Yi knows that she is guilty. Please punish me, Your Highness and Princess Consort. Chu Qingyan looked at the person beside her with some embarrassment. However, her big ice cube was focused on playing with her fingers. He did not want to care at all. She rolled her eyes helplessly. After thinking for a while, she said, You have no choice. Plus, you saved my father and mother before. It could be considered as atonement for your crimes. In the future, we will be allies with your master. We will not pursue the past. If you work hard in the future, We will not treat you unfairly. These words made Lan Yi happy. She kowtowed 3 times. Thank you, Princess Consort, for your magnanimity. Lan Yi has nothing to repay you with. I will do my best. Okay. After Lan Yi and Huo Ling left to do their work, Chu Qingyan suddenly reached out and grabbed Jiang Yi's hand. She looked worried and upset as she said, Big Ice Cube, if we really fall out with your Majesty Father in the future, you might become a traitor recorded in the history books. Will you be sad? Xiao Su chuckled. Am I the kind of person who fishes for fame in your eyes? She quickly shook her head. That's not what I meant. Xiao Su reached out and put her on his knees. He lightly pecked her lips and smiled disapprovingly. Just now, he was just teasing her. I am the ruler, the country, and the people, but I was almost separated from my wife and my family. Right now, I just want to live for myself and ask that person if he regrets it. I have fought on the battlefield for more than 10 years. The winner is king and the loser is a bandit. I understand this. If I am not as good as others, I will admit it. If I win, what do you think the history books will say? Her eyes instantly lit up. The history books were written by the winners. She did not need to worry at all. Her lips curled into a smile like the sun. All right, I will protect you as you move forward. He had elite soldiers, and she had 10,000 beasts. With the two of them working together, there would be a day when they would return to the capital and make the Sichuan emperor repent for what he had done all these years. Xiao ran far away to receive the news from his scouts. He almost crushed the letter in his hand. Your Highness, what happened? As the deputy general, Yanshi saw that his expression was not right and could not help but ask. Chu Qingyan has returned to Xiao Su's side. The person he was worried about still abandoned him without looking back. Xiao Ran gritted his teeth. He felt that his heart was empty and there was nothing to fill it. She is just a woman. She is not worthy of your Highness' anger. Lu Wenfeng did not know about the dispute between them and said indifferently. Yan sure shook his head. General Lu's words are different. This Chu Qingyan is the Chu Qingyan who accompanied the King of England to fight the Southern Blue back to his nest. Moreover, she has a very strong herd of beasts in her hands. It is very disadvantageous for us. We cannot let her help the King of England. Otherwise, this battle will be very difficult to fight. Xiaoran said coldly. He did not look as lost as before. Yanshi thought for a moment. His eyes flashed. I have a plan. Chapter 1391. Let's hear it. Xiao Ran's interest was immediately piqued, and he looked at Yanshi closely. Yanshi nodded and did not beat around the bush. Chu Qingyan had previously disguised herself as a man and disguised herself as Chu Yan. Although not many people knew about this, as long as word got out, she would not be able to use this identity to gain a foothold in Xiao Su's army. After all, women are not allowed to appear in the army, much less lead soldiers in a battle. This method had been supported by everyone. Go on. Xiao Ran's face was calm. Encouraged, Yanshi continued. A few days ago, we have people who have infiltrated their army. Now we can play a role. The fastest thing in the world is rumors. I believe that Chu Qingyan won't be able to stay in the army for long. Xiao Ran nodded, and a ruthless smile appeared on his lips. Do as you say. Yes. Yanshi immediately accepted the order and left. You all can leave too. Xiao Ran waved his hand, and everyone left the tent. Xiao Ran stood in front of the lantern. The hazy light of the lantern made illusions appear in front of his eyes. The beautiful woman tilted her head and smiled at him, but when he looked closely, there was no one in front of him. He reached out and grabbed the corner of the table. His clear eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of shadow, dark and difficult to distinguish. Qingyan, I will prove to you that I am stronger than my brother and can give you a better future. I will prove it. The swaying light made his handsome figure even more slender, but made people feel gloomy for no reason. In the imperial palace of the capital city, Your Majesty, Prince Yi requests an audience. Yuna Chao stood beside the dragon bed and said respectfully to Sichuan Emperor. Sichuan Emperor's hand, holding the scroll, paused. He was surprised. Prince Yi is recuperating recently. How can he have the energy to come to the imperial palace? I think your majesty is not feeling well. Princey is worried about you and came to visit. Eunuch Xiao said with a smile. Let him in. Sichuan Emperor nodded. At this moment, Xiao Ho was standing in front of the palace door, his gaze falling on the imperial garden not far away. Spring was the season when all living things came back to life, while summer was the season when all living things flourished. It was already close to the end of summer. Although they were not in the garden, looking from afar, the trees were verdant and the flowers were flourishing. It was a beautiful sight. It had been a long time since he had been here, and it had been a long time since he had the leisure to admire the surrounding scenery. Now that he had a clear target for his revenge, his heart was even calmer. Maybe it was because of Little Rascal's words. Good and evil will eventually be rewarded. It's not that they won't be rewarded, it's just that the time hasn't come yet. Planting in spring and harvesting in autumn, he hoped that by autumn, everything would be settled, and he would be able to meet up with Little Rascal without any worries. At this moment, he heard the sound of footsteps. The disappointment on his face was replaced by a faint, harmless smile. He turned around and looked at Eunuch Xiao, who was walking towards him. Lord, sorry to keep you waiting. Please follow this old servant. Eunuch Xiao politely raised his hand in invitation. Xiao Ho smiled and nodded, then followed Eunuch Xiao slowly towards the palace door. My father has always been in good health. Why did he suddenly fall ill? Xiao Ho asked worriedly. Eunuch Xiao sighed softly and answered truthfully, Lord is right. His Majesty's illness was too sudden. Perhaps it was because the court has not been peaceful recently. Memorials flew into the imperial study like snowflakes. His Majesty has not had a good rest for 3 consecutive days. With the heavy workload of government affairs and his worries, His Majesty is not made of iron. He fell ill from exhaustion. Xiao Ho nodded. This prince does not walk around the palace often. In the future, I will have to trouble you to take care of my father. Eunuch Xiao hurriedly said, Lord, you are too serious. It is this old servant's duty to take care of His Majesty. I will do my best. As they spoke, the two had passed through the antechamber and arrived at the inner palace where Sichuan Emperor was recuperating. Seeing the person lying on the dragon bed, Xiao Ho immediately bowed. I pay my respects to Imperial Father. No need to be so polite. You are still injured. Chao Ji, bring a chair for Prince C. Sichuan Emperor put down the scroll and ordered. Thank you, Imperial Father. After sitting down, Xiao Ho went straight to the point. I heard that Imperial Father was ill. I was worried and came to the palace to visit. How is Imperial Father feeling now? I am tired. I will be fine after a few days of rest. Sichuan Emperor's concubines gave birth to at least a dozen princes, but only 4 survived and grew up. Xiao Su was born to the Empress, Xiao Yao was born to Consort Wan, Xiao Ho was born to Consort Luo, and Xiao Ran was born to Consort Yu. However, among these 4 sons, he was most concerned about Xiao Su and Xiao Ran. The former was guarded against, and the latter was doted on. As for the 2 in the middle, he rarely paid attention to them. At most, he provided Xiao Ho, who had been ill since childhood, with countless precious herbs. Sichuan had a vast territory and abundant resources, so he did not lack these herbs. On the surface, this son of his was very obedient and diligent in recuperating. He never participated in any struggles, so he was able to live well under his nose. However, in the recent days, this son's performance in front of civil and military officials was beyond his expectations. Ho! Or why did that appear in the morning court? The West Xian Emperor took the teacup from Eunuch Xiao, but he was not in a hurry to drink it. He looked at Eunuch Xiao with a smile, as if they were father and son conversing normally, but there was a sharp light in his eyes. Xiao Ho knew that his performance that day had aroused his father's suspicions. After all, he was a paranoid person. Otherwise, he would not have been on guard against his eldest brother for so many years. Thus, he had already thought of a plan to deal with him. A look of grief and indignation appeared on his face. His hands clenched into fists, and his sickly pale face flushed red. However, this was due to anger. This son received news that Imperial Father wanted to seek justice for this son. This son was afraid that those evildoers would not be brought to justice, so this son stood out to identify them. The marriage was Jing's own decision, and I, her husband, was also chosen by her. Although I did not like non-song women at first, after interacting with her, I gradually became attracted to her naivety. He was so direct that Sichuan Emperor was momentarily at a loss for words. Imperial Father, you also know that Ai's life has been like a pool of stagnant water. Only with Jing's arrival did Ai's life have a trace of vitality. I originally thought that this was a gift from the heavens, allowing Ai to live out the rest of his life without regrets. Who knew that those people would be so vicious, actually making a move against Ai? And because of Ai, Jing also died. Xiao was only acting at first, but as he spoke, he did not realize that his true feelings were revealed. His eyes were slightly red, and his face was filled with unwillingness. How could I let the culprits go unpunished? So, he stood up and knelt on the ground. Prostrating himself, he mournfully said, I implore Imperial Father to seek justice for Ai. Otherwise, even if I died, I would not be able to rest in peace. The West Xian Emperor stared in shock at his son kneeling before him. That determined face and sorrowful eyes reminded him of the Luofei of the past. Chapter 1392. His probing gaze turned into recollection, as if he was recalling the past. At the end of the busy street, Luofei stood under the lanterns, looking around with her beautiful eyes, making people forget her beauty. Sichuan Emperor returned to his senses and looked at his son, whom he had never paid attention to. Now, he discovered that he had grown up with outstanding charm and was even more outstanding than Luofei. However, his body was too weak. When he was young, the imperial physician had said that he would not live past the age of 20, but he had survived. However, he was afraid that he would not be able to live past the age of 30. Thinking of this, Sichuan Emperor hid the trace of doubt in his heart. He sighed softly and said, I didn't expect that there would be such an infatuated person in our imperial family. Forget it. Jin will give you an explanation. Hearing that he had given up on probing him, Xiao revealed a mocking smile without leaving a trace and thanked him verbally. After saying such a long speech, Xiao couldn't help coughing. Sichuan Emperor couldn't stand it and had eunuch Xiao help him up. You came to visit the sick, but you are even weaker than Jun, who is sick. Xiao laughed at himself. I'm already on the verge of death. I will be lucky if I can live a day. Imperial Father is still strong and healthy. You will definitely live a long life. Nonsense. You will live a peaceful life. Don't say such discouraging words. Sichuan Emperor reprimanded him, but seeing him like this, he felt a little sour in his heart. Although he rarely looked at his son, he was still his flesh and blood. Xiao glanced at the pity on his father's face and couldn't help but sneer in his heart. He was afraid that his father didn't feel sorry for his son, but for himself. After so many years, he only had 4 sons. When he died, there would only be 3 left. For the imperial family, this was the generation with the least children. Imperial Father, you don't have to worry. This son is just going down to serve Imperial Mother in advance. She passed away early, and this son was unable to fulfill his filial duties in front of her. I feel very guilty, but I can make up for it in the future. When Xiao mentioned Luofei, Sichuan Emperor's face changed slightly, but he quickly hid it. When Xiao said this, he stared at Sichuan Emperor. Sure enough, he found some clues on that face that was good at hiding his emotions. His gaze instantly turned cold, and then it quickly melted away. He lowered his head and no longer looked at Sichuan Emperor. You are a filial child, Sichuan Emperor said somewhat perfunctorily. Afterwards, Xiao no longer mentioned the topic of Luofei. The father and son chatted for a while before Xiao got up and excused himself. After Xiao left the palace, eunuch Xiao saw the West Xian Emperor sitting there silently. He couldn't help but ask, What is your majesty thinking about? Just now Hor mentioned Luofei. I was wondering how much he knew about what happened in the past. He knew that he had acted secretly in the past, Those who knew the inside story had either been killed by him or taken in by him for his own use. However, there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall. It wouldn't be strange if Xiao knew about it. Eunuch Xiao couldn't wait to slap his own mouth. The more he asked, the more mistakes he made. But since he'd already asked, he could only bite the bullet and answer. His Royal Highness Prince, he was not born yet. When Luo Fei passed away, he was only a 6-year-old child. He should know about it. In the past 20 years, His Royal Highness Prince, he didn't pay attention to the outside world. He wholeheartedly recuperated. I think your majesty is overthinking. Eunuch Xiao's words eased Shishuan Emperor's frown. He remembered his third son, who had just knelt down and begged for Pang Zhijing's life. He didn't hesitate to plead for a woman. How could he have the ability to endure hardships and hide his courage? The West Xian Emperor smiled confidently. You're right. He won't know. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to do anything. He's too weak. He doesn't have the decisiveness and boldness that I have. If he really wanted to avenge the Luo family, he wouldn't have to spend much effort to make his son disappear from this world in a moment. Eunuch Xiao wiped his sweat. He didn't dare to listen to these words. As for the sickly prince who had been rejected by the Emperor of Xixian, he was now leaning against the carriage. He no longer looked as sickly as he had in the imperial palace. His eyes were calmly looking at Lin Jiangdong inside the carriage. What did you find out? Lin Jiangdong looked admiringly at his casually leaning but confident master. Lord, you guessed that there was something wrong with His Majesty's illness. You guessed right. Our people found that although there was no problem with the prescription His Majesty took, the medicine that was boiled was not from the ingredients on the prescription. Today, our informant secretly stole some dregs of the medicine. They're in our hands now. When we go back and let the doctors in the manor take a look, we will know what is inside. Xiao wasn't surprised that his guess was confirmed. Looking at Eunuch Xiao's expression, he should have found something else. Other than this, what else is there? Lin Jiangdong's usually stern expression showed a strange smile. The person boiling the medicine was sent by Consort Yu. If there really was a problem with the medicine, then Consort Yu would be the first to be implicated. His Majesty probably didn't expect that the one to act against him would be his favored consort. Xiao snorted softly. Empress Liang is under house arrest, and now imperial concubine Yu has complete control over the inner palace. It is true that eldest imperial brother has betrayed the imperial house, but she does not care about Ben Wang and second imperial brother. It is only a matter of time before Xiao Rand takes the position of crown prince. However, the emperor is strong, and it is not a problem for him to be emperor for another 10 or 20 years. But she cannot wait. The Fu family is being punished, and they might be executed at any time. She was born in the imperial house. She was born in the Fu family. That person who had framed the faithful and harmed his mother and family was no longer worthy of him, calling him imperial father. Jehovah is right. His Majesty is suffering the consequences of his own actions. Lin Jiangdong nodded and said, It is better if the waters become muddier. It is beneficial for Ben Wang to fish in troubled waters. Xiao curled his lips. He could already imagine how chaotic Xixian would be in the near future, and how his good father would be in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Ben Wang has also gained something from this trip. The emperor has already dispelled his suspicions of Ben Wang. In the future, no one will come to monitor us. In the future, you can do whatever you want. However, you have to be careful in everything. Do not leave any evidence behind. After all, he is a suspicious person. The reason he had come to the palace was because he had sensed that the emperor was monitoring him. What he had said in the hall last time, although there was no problem on the surface, it was the most important evidence to exonerate his eldest brother. Therefore, the emperor had become suspicious of him. Many spies had appeared around him. He didn't care about them and just dealt with them in secret. However, he always sought stability in doing things. Therefore, it was better to treat the root of the problem and have the emperor completely let down his guard so that he could carry out his plan. This one understands. This one will restrain the people below. At this time, someone knocked on the carriage. Following that, a letter was handed in. Lin Jiangdong took it and read it. Then, he passed it to Jehovah. It was sent by Lonnie. Xiao Ho slowly curled his lips. Teacher, the day of our revenge is near. Lin Jiangdong naturally knew what news Lon he had sent. However, he didn't expect that Jehovah had already guessed what was written in the letter before reading it. He couldn't help but smile from the bottom of his heart. Then, this one congratulates Jehovah in advance. Chapter 1393. Xiao Ho opened the letter. It was just as he expected. His Royal Highness is a courageous person. We've opposed him so many times before, but he still believed us without a second word. He truly is an admirable person. Lin Jiangdong took the letter and skimmed through it before sighing with emotion. Those who achieve great things don't bother with trifles. Moreover, his courage and courage have always been stronger than normal people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lived until now. Lord is right. Teacher, this prince regrets it. This water can actually be stirred up even more. Xiao Ho leaned against the wall of the carriage with a lazy expression. However, a glint flashed through his eyes, and a faint smile hung on his lips. Lord's meaning is? Lin Jiangdong humbly asked for advice. Xiao Ho softly spat out a few words. The Liang family and the Fu family. After dinner, Chu Qingyan sent off her parents who had come over for dinner. Since she had nothing to do, she strolled around the big ice tent to digest her food. Her identity hadn't been made public yet, so it wasn't good for her to walk around outside. Thus, if there was anything she needed, Jean, Xin, and Su would help her run errands. Bai Yutong had been brought over to play by her father. Xiaohai didn't like staying in the tent, so he brought glutinous rice ball out to play. The only one who accompanied her in the room was Snowflake Cake. Perhaps it was because it hadn't rested for days on the road, but Snowflake Cake had fallen asleep by her feet while yawning. Outside, there was the sound of heavy armor clashing, running, and the sound of the wind. She was surrounded by familiar scents, and her heart couldn't help but feel at ease. Just as she was moving the Snowflake Cake to stroke her fur, a black shadow appeared in front of her eyes. Before she could raise her head, her feet felt light, and her entire body was pulled into a strong embrace. She quickly calmed down and rubbed against him like a puppy. Then, she raised her head and asked curiously, "Why do you, a person who usually plays with swords and sabers, have the scent of a scholar? It smells so good." "That's because your husband can pick up a sword and hold a book. As for the good smell, it's because iron is in the eye of the beholder." She thinks that everything about this prince is good. Xiao Su chuckled as he placed her on his knees and reached out to pinch her face. She chuckled. Was he indirectly praising her for her intelligence and martial prowess? He didn't expect to hear the big ice cube praise himself like that. "How thick-skinned," she said angrily. Xiao Su smiled and lowered his head to cover her alluring lips, hooking her little tongue out and playing with it. At first, she was afraid that someone would come in and refuse, but she couldn't resist his overbearingness and enthusiasm. In the end, she accepted her fate. Since he didn't care, she had nothing to worry about. She remembered that he was still a bit inexperienced in the past, but men were self-taught in this aspect. After so many times of practice, he had already reached the point of perfection. He could tease her until she turned into a puddle of mud every time. When the two separated while panting, she was still too shy to look at him. She didn't want to see Xuehua Cake covering its eyes with its paws and peeking at them through a crack. When it saw that she had noticed, it immediately lay down and pretended that it hadn't seen anything. This appearance made her both embarrassed and angry. She couldn't help but push the person on top of her. "It's all your fault. Xuehua Cake is still young." He let it see such an inappropriate side. She didn't have the face to see little annoyance in the future. Xiao Su looked at the one on the ground pretending to be dead and said seriously, "I was careless just now." She thought that he knew his mistake, but then she heard him say, "I'll remember to avoid them next time." She almost choked on her own saliva when she heard this. This person had become irresistible after last night. His words made her blush and her heart beat faster. He even used such a serious tone to tease her. "What nonsense are you saying? Her face was red and her heart was irritated. She jumped down from his lap and tidied up the clothes she had torn. Because it was men's clothing, wasn't as complicated as women's clothing, so it was easier for him to work on it. She couldn't help but immediately tidy it up. Xiao didn't stop her. If he wanted, she wouldn't be able to escape at all. He put his elbow on the table and one hand on his chin, admiring his princess consort tidying up in a flurry. I didn't say anything wrong. After all, 3 of them are male. I won't let them see you again. You can only belong to me. Look, these sweet words came out of his mouth to coax her. There was no trace of the cold and heartless attitude he had when they first met, but hearing it made her heart burst with joy. What girl didn't like being held in the palm of her beloved's hand? But she didn't forget where they were now. After her bashfulness, she stood in front of him. Your mouth is full of nonsense. That's right. Where am I sleeping tonight? Why haven't you arranged a room for me yet? Or should I stay in the same place as Xining? When going out, everything should be simple. She wasn't a spoiled girl. She was more like a dandelion. No matter where the wind blew, she could be at ease. So she had the temperament of a great family, the agility of a beast, and the tenacity of grass. And this kind of girl was destined to shine in this world. Xining and Lan Yi are together. Do you want to squeeze in with them? Xiao lightly replied. Then should I squeeze in with mother? She didn't care and continued to ask. You're already of marriageable age. If you still sleep with your mother-in-law, won't people laugh at you? Xiao lightly continued to reply. This won't do, that won't do. What do you think I should do? She wasn't a person who liked to cause trouble for others. Moreover, the war was imminent, so she had to make the best use of her resources. There was no need to add another tent for her. Looking at her fuming appearance, Xiao smiled and pulled her back into his arms. His gaze fell on her beautiful face, and his eyes rippled with mirth. But his tone was very serious as he said, in order to not let Wang Fei be laughed at, Ben Wang is willing to offer himself as a pillow and give half of the bed to Wang Fei. What does Wang Fei think? PFFF, she finally realized that he had gone in such a big circle just to wait for her. She couldn't help but laugh. Big Ice Block, why are you so sly? Seeing her smile, he lowered his head and gave her a peck. As long as you like it. What did he hear her say that she liked it? But this isn't appropriate. If you keep someone in your tent, it will definitely arouse suspicion. When the time comes, how are you going to explain it to your subordinates? Although she was obsessed with appearances, and the other party was her lord, she was very determined not to be seduced by his beauty, because she didn't know what identity she was going to use to appear in front of the army. You don't need to care. How could other people dare to say anything about his woman? She shook her head. That won't do. You know that my face is thin. Moreover, what identity do I have to stay in the army? Xiao gave a low laugh. I'm afraid that I won't be able to find a woman as thin-faced as I am. These words made her remember how she took the initiative last night, and she couldn't help blushing. This person was too much. All right, don't worry. Tomorrow, I'll have people send you and father-in-law away to a safe place. It's too dangerous here, so it's not suitable for you to stay in the army. No, I want to help you. She didn't even think about it before rejecting him. Be good. Even without your beast herd, I can still defeat them. Chapter 1394. As soon as Xiao finished speaking, he could feel the anger of the person in his embrace. He knew that the result would be like this, but he couldn't bear for her to take the risk. Big Ice Cube, how can you make a unilateral decision? You once promised me that you would let me fight side by side with you. How can you go back on your words? She sat up straight and looked straight into his eyes. Her stubborn eyes did not back down. This time is different from the past. He replied with a slight headache. It's different from the past. You have to let me accompany you. You know that with Little Hai and the others here, our chances of winning will increase. Ian, I must protect your safety. Xiao reached out to caress her face, as if he was caressing a flawless jade that was incomparably precious. But your safety is equally important. She softened her tone, took his hand, and pressed it against her heart. I've worked hard for so many years, just so that one day I can stand by your side fearlessly. Whether it's glory, wealth, or misfortune, I can share it with you. You can't be so cruel as to deprive me of my right. If you aren't here, what joy is there in life? What fear is there in death? These sincere words moved Xiao Su deeply. What joy is there in life? What fear is there in death? Good. I promise you that I will take you with me wherever I go. I won't leave you behind again. Chu Qingyan finally revealed a smile and reached out to hug him. Her eyes were moist as she rubbed against his shoulder. He reached out to lift her chin and fiercely kissed her. This kiss was even more intense than before. With a wife like this, what more could a husband ask for? When they separated again, she was already lying on the hard bed. She blinked and then pulled on her clothes and shrunk into the corner. This is the military camp. We just consummated our marriage last night. Are you willing to let your husband only watch and not eat? Xiao Su buried his head in her shoulder, and his muffled voice entered her ears. Her face was burning hot as she stammered. You are the general. This isn't good. Feeling the person in his embrace tense up, Xiao Su couldn't help but laugh out loud. The pleasant and clear voice made her even more embarrassed. Was the big ice cube for real? She only felt a tightness around her waist before her entire body was pulled into his embrace. Initially, she was still wary of him messing around, but then she heard his amused voice above her head. I was just teasing you. We're only going to sleep. She heaved a sigh of relief, but she still asked, the kind where we just chat under the blanket. What else? He asked with a smile. He wasn't a young brat. He couldn't just focus on pleasure and ignore the big picture. He knew that the little fellow was thinking for him, so he naturally had to think for her as well. Big ice cubes are the best. She chuckled. No response. She had just praised him, and he had started a dive factory. He had even used a teasing tone, but she could not refuse. She held his face with both hands and planted a kiss on his cheek. However, he was not satisfied and returned her a long and shameful kiss. Afraid that something might go wrong, Xiao Su knew when to stop. He hugged her and stroked her long hair from time to time. Didn't you want to chat? Let's chat. He successfully diverted her shyness with one sentence. She quietly leaned on his chest and blinked. Do you think Xiao Ho is trustworthy? Isn't it a bit late for you to ask now? The little fellow only asked when the cooperation had already been negotiated. He couldn't help but chuckle and shake his head. How can that be? At most, we could just break the contract. She raised her eyebrows and snorted. The big ice cube was laughing at her for not thinking things through. I know him, so you don't have to worry. Why? Because only an opponent will understand an opponent. He bit his finger and flicked her forehead. She held her head and rolled her eyes at him. However, her tone was very serious. That's true. You've been fighting for so many years, and no one knows each other better than you. Then I'm relieved. I don't think you're worried about the cooperation. Seeing her rubbing her forehead, he knew that he didn't use any strength, but he still reached out to help her. Enjoying the service of a handsome man, Chu Qingyan comfortably closed her eyes. She didn't feel nervous when he saw through her thoughts. That's right. I'm worried about another thing. Xiao Ho is too cunning. You might think that he's methodical when he does things, but when you look at him carefully, there's no trace of it. I'm afraid that he's too scheming and will devote himself to revenge. In the end, he'll lose all love and be blinded by hatred. Xiao Su didn't say anything and quietly listened to her continue. When I was in the capital, I heard that after Zijing's accident, Xiao Ho seemed to have changed into a different person. I'm not sure if he really has feelings for Zijing. You're afraid that Xiao Ho isn't a good person and that Princess Pang has entrusted herself to the wrong person. Xiao Su hit the nail on the head. She nodded heavily. Xiao Su rested his chin on the top of her head and stroked her hair. There's one thing you might not know. Huling found out that the attack on Xiao Ho that day was a collaboration between him and the Prince of Nansong. They directed and acted out a show to frame me, but they missed out on one person. That person was Pang Zijing, who rushed to save him. His reaction after the incident was real, and so was his pain. Chu Qingyan was stunned. Then, she clenched her fists and her eyes reddened. She gritted her teeth and said, So you're saying that he brought all of this upon himself, and Jing was innocently implicated? Maybe he's already been punished. Xiao thought of that day in the hall. His expression didn't seem fake, but more like he was revealing his true feelings. "None of you men are good," she said angrily. Xiao rubbed his nose. Was he implicated just like that? TSK, when the city gates catch fire, the fish in the moat suffer. Then you're planning to avenge that good friend of yours? Oomph. There's still no news from Jing, but I believe in Yin Luo. Since she's agreed, she'll definitely cure her. One day, she'll stand in front of me in perfect condition. But I won't take revenge on her behalf. I'll tell her the truth and let her make her own decisions. She didn't have the right to judge her friend's life. She would only lend a helping hand when her friend needed it. Ian is so magnanimous. He pecked her. Haha, but before that, I won't reveal anything to him. Chu Qingyin snorted. People often didn't cherish what they had when they had it, and only regretted it when they lost it. This was the punishment Xiao deserved. Only by painstakingly teaching him a lesson would he not let her down in the future. Xiao couldn't help but worry for his third brother, who had just been promoted to an ally. You can't tell him either. Chu Qingyin thought of something and narrowed her eyes to threaten him. She only felt relieved when he promised not to interfere. During this period of time, she had been wandering from place to place. Not only did she have to avoid her pursuers, but she also had to inquire about their whereabouts. She was so tense that she didn't dare to relax. Now that she was lying next to her sweetheart, her guard down, she was like a harmless child who didn't know anything about the world. She curled up in his arms and fell asleep peacefully. Xiao's gaze was gentle as he placed her on his chest, and then he closed his eyes. He hadn't had a good rest for days and nights. Now, he could finally sleep. However, there was a rumor going around in the army. No one knew what kind of situation would await them the next day. Forget it. I can sleep today, but I'll worry about it tomorrow. Chapter 1395. Since last night, a rumor had been spreading through the army. The more it spread, the more suspicious it became. Have you heard? The young General Chu who used to follow His Highness is actually a woman. Is that true? I've seen that young general before. She's handsome, brave, and smart. She's not an ordinary person. Don't make things up. How can it be false? I heard that she's His Highness' beloved woman. Because His Highness couldn't bear to part with her, he brought her into the army. Yesterday, someone saw her appear in the army. Last night, she stayed in His Highness' tent and didn't come out. Think about it. Who is His Highness? He never lets anyone get close to him. Normally, he doesn't leave anyone when he's resting. Think about it carefully. So His Highness really delayed proper business because of a beauty? No wonder he told us to bide our time these past few days. It turns out he's enjoying the grace of a beauty. These people all talked at once, as if they had seen it with their own eyes. They made it sound as if they were catching wind and chasing shadows. Chu Qingyin had disguised herself as a man and risked her life for Sichuan. She had defeated the Southern Blue Army many times, but these soldiers at the bottom of the hierarchy had never seen her before. They had only heard of her accomplishments. Now that they knew she was a woman, they began to doubt her victories. So you're saying that this person was just lucky. Either the soldiers she brought were strong, or she just happened to run into a dead rat. That's how she gained so much fame. In ancient times, if a woman defeated a man, where would they put their face? In an instant, their admiration for Chu Qingyin turned into disdain and even slander. Some people in the crowd quietly retreated. The task of creating rumors had been accomplished. Now, all they had to do was wait for the rumors to ferment. At this time, Chu Qingyin, who was in the dark, was slowly walking toward the tent for discussion. After last night, she and Big Ice Cube had reached an agreement. She would continue to accompany him as Chu Qingyin, but in exchange, she had to live in his tent. She would use the excuse of saving supplies for the army. Chu Qingyin had become more and more accustomed to this person who would take advantage of her whenever he found an opportunity. Sure enough, he was an insatiable wolf. However, ever since she came out of the big ice tent, she felt that the atmosphere around her was a little strange. The soldiers who were either standing or sitting down to rest were looking at her with a strange light in their eyes. As a stranger who had just entered the camp, it was normal for people to size her up. However, she felt that these gazes were very unfriendly. Not only were they unfriendly, they were also filled with disgust and contempt. This made her frown involuntarily. However, she did not reprimand or stop him. Instead, she whispered a few words to Sue-yi, who was following her. Sue-yi glanced at the people around him, nodded, and went down. After giving her instructions, Chu Qingyin continued to lead Jin Xin and the others to the main tent as if nothing had happened. But before she reached the main tent, she heard the sound of planks being struck and miserable screams rising and falling. She focused her mind and couldn't help but quicken her pace. The ones guarding outside the tent were not normal guards, but the fierce cavalry led by Huoling. Chu Qingyin was a little surprised. Huoling immediately came up when he saw her and said in a low voice, "Little princess, there are several soldiers being punished inside. Master said for this subordinate to pass this message to you. You can go back and rest today and come back tomorrow to participate in the discussion." This morning, Big Ice Cube had asked her to come over, and now he had asked her to go back. She didn't know what had happened inside, but something big must have happened for Big Ice Cube to punish the generals at this checkpoint. Since he had given the order, she would listen. The discussion was just a formality, and the main purpose was to meet the generals and get to know each other. There was no hurry for now. Huoling saw her agree and couldn't help letting out a sigh of relief. Chu Qingyin saw his expression and felt it was strange, but she still turned to leave. Halfway there, Sue-yi came back with an ugly expression. Chu Qingyin did not wait to go back and found a secluded place to listen to his report. "Master, there are rumors in the army that are unfavorable to you and His Highness. They have exposed your identity as Chu Qingyin and said that you have confused His Highness, caused chaos in the army, and even wanted to lead the army into battle. This rumor is spreading like wildfire, and it is becoming more and more ridiculous." No wonder Sue-yi had an angry expression. Jin Xin and the others also had angry expressions when they heard this. Chu Qingyin curled her lips and said with a smile that was not a smile, "No wonder I was wondering why there were so many people staring at me on the way here. I thought it was because of my beauty, but I never thought it would be like this." Master's self-mockery was funny, but no one could laugh. Sue-yi clenched his fist and continued, "Master, when I came back, I also heard that there were several generals who heard the news and asked His Highness to confirm it. They wanted His Highness to send you back." This made Chu Qingyin think of the sound of caning she heard outside the main tent. It turned out that the Big Ice Cube was angry because of this. No wonder Huoling was guarding outside and did not let her in. It seemed that the Big Ice Cube wanted to suppress this matter and not let her be affected. This rumor was obviously directed at her. Even if the Big Ice Cube could suppress it for a while, it could not suppress it forever. "Master, why don't we arrest those people who are causing trouble and punish them severely?" Su-si suggested angrily. "No, gossip is a fearful thing. You can stop one person, but you can't stop others. It will be easier for people to think that Master is angry out of humiliation." Su-air waved his hand and disagreed. "Then are we just going to let them splash dirty water on Master?" Although Su-wu restrained himself, his eyes were about to spit fire. Now, besides Jin Xin, Su-yi and Su-wu, who were following Chu Qingyin, were guarding in the open, and the rest were working in the dark. Several people finished talking one after another, but there was no result. If it could be solved directly with a knife, they would not even blink their eyes. But this matter could not be solved with fists at all, and if it was not handled well, it was very likely to cause chaos in the army's morale. After saying that there was no result, everyone remembered that their master had not said a word since just now. They could not help but look over. They saw her standing under the green tree, her wide robe fluttering in the wind. Her eyes were calm, and the corners of her mouth were slightly raised with a faint smile. Every time they saw their master like this, they knew that their master had already made a decision, and their hearts felt lighter. Jean Xian stepped forward and asked, Master, what should we do? The rumor is directed at me, so I should fight it, right? It is not my style to hide in my shell when being schemed against. Although the rumor was directed at her, it was actually an opportunity to cause trouble for the big ice cube. It was not difficult to guess the intention of the person behind this. Chu Qingyan reached out and flicked the dead leaves that fell on her shoulders. She straightened her clothes and put her hands behind her back. She smiled faintly at her subordinates and said, Accompany me to meet those people. After saying that, she walked in the direction of the main tent again, leisurely, as if she was just taking a walk. Seeing that their master had a card up her sleeve, everyone looked at each other and immediately followed with a smile. It seemed that someone was going to be unlucky. Chapter 1396. When Hualing saw Chu Qingyan return, he couldn't help but be stunned, especially when he saw the unique smile on the little princess face that sent chills down people's spines. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva and confess. Master doesn't want the little princess to worry, so I asked for the little princess' understanding. Chu Qingyan gave a soft snort. I know you're loyal. This time, I'll put it on the tab and settle it with you later. As she spoke, she lifted the curtain and strode in. Hualing watched the little princess go in. How could he dare to stop her? He wanted to cry, but had no tears. He was only following orders. If he knew that he would offend the little princess, he would have left Fang Yu outside and not take on this task. Xiao Su heard the noise and looked over. He saw a figure as thick as fire appear in the tent. He was slightly stunned. Didn't he have someone invite her back? Chu Qingyan's appearance stunned all the generals standing inside. What a handsome young man. When did such a person exist in the army? Why hadn't they seen her before? Some of the people who had participated in the Southern Blue Army recognized her. Chu Qingyan, the young general who had repelled the enemy by himself. At the same time, he was the main character of this rumor. They looked at the people being beaten with boards and then looked at the person in the main seat. They didn't know what to say. Why did you come here? Xiao Su watched her walk over step by step and couldn't help but raise a brow. Chu Qingyan walked in front of him and gave him a military salute. Then she smiled and replied, I heard that a colleague was punished because of this one's matter. As the person involved, this one thought that it was necessary to come and take a look. Xiao Su narrowed his eyes. It could be seen that the little fellow already knew, but he didn't approve of her appearing at this time. There's nothing to believe in just rumors. You go back first. This one will summon you if there's something. Even she could hear the protectiveness in his words. Everyone present was smart, so how could they not hear it? Like this, she had to intervene even more. Your Highness, this matter concerns this one's reputation. This one can't just stand by and watch. Seeing that she had made up her mind, Xiao Su lowered his eyes and stopped trying to stop her. Then what are you going to do? For the time being, I'll stop the caning of a few of my colleagues. Since it's because of me, I'd like to hear what they have to say and see if they can convince me. She emphasized the last few words, but her smile was still as calm as ever. Just now, when everyone saw His Highness protect this young man without any principles, their hearts that originally did not believe in the rumors could not help but waver. The more they looked at this jade-faced young man, the more he looked like a girl. The way they looked at him also changed. Chu Qingyan turned a deaf ear. Her words were directed at those who were gritting their teeth and glaring at her, but her gaze was directed at the person in the main seat. There was a faint smile in her eyes, as if to reassure him not to interfere. Xiao Su received her message. After a moment of silence, he raised his hand to stop the punishment. All right, this prince allows it. Hearing this, everyone present breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that His Highness was not unprincipled in his defense. However, everyone had forgotten that Chu Qingyan was the one who had made this request, and their Highness had agreed to it without any hesitation. There were 3 generals who were lying on the ground being beaten. They were all strong and sturdy, and their faces were mighty. Although they were being caned, they were unyielding and did not beg for mercy. It must be known that the military canes were not normal canes, and the executors were the best in the fierce cavalry. Every hit was real, and they were lucky to be able to withstand it. May I ask the names of these generals? Chu Qingyan made a hand gesture. Su, Yi, and the others helped the three up. Kneeling was better than lying on the ground. She did not want others to say that she was humiliating these generals. When she came in to talk to His Highness, they had already guessed her identity. Today, they were reduced to this state because of her. They were angry, but because His Highness was present, they had no choice but to reply. Wu Lin, Lu Weiyun, Hong Jianhua. She had heard the names of these people before. Although she knew about Big Ice Cube's training, most of them were his old generals. However, she had never participated in it, so it was normal that these people did not know her. However, she knew their names because Big Ice Cube had given her a list of names. These three people were good fighters who had followed him to the north and south, but brave and wise generals were too rare. These three people were too honest, suitable for charging and breaking through enemy lines, but not suitable for brain work, so it was normal for them to be used as guns. At the same time, she was also very clear that these three people had high prestige in the army. If this matter was not handled well, although it would not affect their trust in Big Ice Cube, it would be a big obstacle for her to stay in the army. Generals, this one has no enmity with you, and we have never met before. Why are you wronging this one, Chu? She stood in front of them, cupped her hands, and asked with a smile. There was no anger from being wronged, but instead, there was humility and warmth. If this person confronted them from the beginning, these three people with bad tempers would not let her off easily. Now, this jade-like person in front of them was polite. As the saying goes, one does not hit a smiling person. They suppress their anger and let one of them speak. We have no enmity with you, but if you continue to stay in the army, I'm afraid you will have a deadly enmity with the army. Wu Lin looked at her coldly. Although his face was full of anger, he was still polite, at least in his own eyes. Chu Qingyan found it funny. General Wu, why do you say that? At this time, Lu Weiyun said, May I ask this little brother, are you a man or a woman? Such a straightforward question made Xiao Su's eyebrows twitch. Just as he was about to stand up and scold her, the person in front of him suddenly turned her head and blinked at him with her back facing everyone. She was mischievous and cute, but her eyes were pleading for him not to interfere. Xiao Su saw that she was mischievous and was not affected at all. He could not help but suppress his desire to stand up for her and leaned back in his chair again. Since the little fellow was so confident, he would wait a little longer. If it really did not work out, he would clean up the mess for her. Seeing his reaction, Chu Qingyan looked back at the people in front of her with satisfaction. The three of them were not the only ones who wanted to know the answer to this question. The generals standing on both sides also stared at her with bright eyes. Chu Qingyan curled her lips and crossed her arms. She said without bashfulness, That's right, I'm a woman. Once these words were said, everyone was shocked and angry, especially Lu Weiyun, who had asked the question just now. He pointed at Chu Qingyan and said to Xiao Su bitterly, Your Highness, look. This person admitted that she's a woman. Do you still want to keep her in the army? If this were to spread, what would the thousands of soldiers think? Where would your Highness put his face? Before Xiao Su could say anything, Chu Qingyan had already spoken. She pretended to be surprised. General Lu, you're exaggerating. Although I'm a woman, I can also do something for your Highness. Why would you say that it would humiliate your Highness if this were spread? As a foxy woman, you use your beauty to serve the Emperor. Sooner or later, His Highness will delay his great undertaking because of you. Wu Lin scolded her angrily. Chu Qingyan's expression changed slightly. You mean that His Highness's will is not firm enough and a mere woman can disturb his mind? These words instantly pinned the crime of slandering a superior. Wu Lin did not dare to look at the person on the main seat and angrily rebuked, You're twisting words and forcing logic. Chu Qingyan snorted softly. Her previous modesty and gentleness receded, and a restrained light instantly bloomed. Her beautiful eyes glittered. It's quite boring to quarrel. Why don't we make a bet? Chapter 1397. Quarrel? She actually said that their questioning was quarrel? It wasn't just Wu Lin's group of three. Everyone else's faces twitched as they looked at the person standing in the center, who wasn't afraid of anything. What kind of person was she? Bet? Are you treating the military rules as child's play? A general at the side couldn't stand it and retorted. Chu Qingyan shrugged. It's because I'm not treating it as child's play that I want to compete with you. The most outstanding people under His Highness. What? You don't dare? After this pause, she flattered them and provoked them. The first part smoothed their hair, and the second part successfully made them fall into the trap. Let's compete then. Do you think I'm afraid of a woman like you? Wu Lin said valiantly and disdainfully. However, as his words fell, he felt a cold wind blow over his neck. He immediately shrunk his neck back and looked at the person on the main seat. He saw that His Highness was calmly looking at everyone and did not look in his direction. He couldn't help but let out a light breath. However, he didn't dare to say those curses in the general's army. General Wu agreed. What about the others? Don't say that this Chu bullied you when the time comes and renege on the bet. Chu Qingyan was like a cool breeze as she looked at everyone with a smile, as if she was just asking how the weather was today. During this time, someone stretched his neck and asked, "Tell us, what do you want to bet, and what do you want to compete in? Otherwise, when the time comes and we'll be led by the nose, we won't be able to do anything." The question hit the nail on the head. Not only Wu Lin and Huo Ling, but even Xiao Su was very curious. What method did his little fellow want to use to deal with the current situation? Chu Qingyan curled her lips, and a beautiful smile hung on her lips. She spread her hands and looked a little innocent. I also don't know what to compete in. Why don't you all decide? I believe that you won't propose anything too outrageous. After saying this, she added a very bright smile, full of trust. Everyone didn't know how to react to her words. This person had just taken the initiative to propose a bet, and they thought that she had come prepared. They didn't expect that the final choice would fall into their hands. Should they say that this person was too conceited, too confident, or too brainless? When Huo Ling and the others heard this, they couldn't help looking at their little princess with worried expressions. Although they knew she was bold, wasn't she a bit too bold today? Xiao Su furrowed his brows. He didn't quite agree. This was too much nonsense. He subconsciously wanted to stop her. Most of these people were trained by him, so he knew what they were capable of. If this continued, she would be at a disadvantage. However, Lu Weiyun and the others' faces turned red. They grinned and said, "You said it yourself. Don't say that we bullied you." "That's right. Your Highness can testify to what I said just now." Chu Qingyan did not look at him. Instead, she turned sideways and cupped her fists at her iceberg. She knew that he would not be able to hold himself back from standing up for her. She decided to strike first and use her words to shut him up. Xiao Su looked at her. This little fellow was becoming more and more good at grasping his thoughts. He loosened his clenched fists. It was unknown what he thought of in the end, but his brows relaxed. He slowly nodded to his subordinates who were afraid he would be biased. "This king will testify." Everyone instantly let out a sigh of relief. They began to think about how to embarrass Chu Qingyan. Letting them men compete with a woman was already a kind of humiliation. If they lost to her, it would be a great humiliation, so they would not let her have an easy time. However, the clear voice sounded again. "Has everyone thought about what to compete in? I believe that in front of His Highness, the competition everyone proposes will be able to convince everyone." Wu Lin snorted coldly. "With your mother." Before he finished speaking, his neck was pressed down again. He almost knelt down again. He couldn't help but grit his teeth and change his words. "Competing with Miss, we naturally will not let others say that we are bullying the weak." When he finished speaking, he was already drenched in cold sweat and his hands and feet were cold. Xiao Su calmly retracted his gaze. How could his people be insulted? "All right, then may I ask what the competition is?" "You can propose 3 types of competition." Chu Qingyan nodded and asked with a smile. "Since it is in the military, then it will be a competition that will be used in battle." Hong Jianhua, who had been silent all this time, looked coldly at Chu Qingyan. Then he turned and cupped his hands towards Xiao Su on the main seat. "Your Highness, this general feels that we can propose a competition." This miss can propose a competition. The last competition will be decided by your highness to show fairness. Hong Jianhua had a high position in the military. When he spoke, not many people objected. Xiao Su looked admiringly at the speaker and nodded aloud. Since the leader had spoken, she naturally had no objections. However, Chu Qingyin still looked at Hong Jianhua. This person had a clear distinction between public and private matters and did not bully the weak. She admired him. We propose that the first competition be archery, Lu Weiyin said. Everyone nodded. Huo Ling and the others showed strange smiles. Xiao Su nodded. How about the second competition be fist skills? The moment he said that, everyone agreed. They saw that Chu Qingyin was so skinny and weak. One punch from her would probably be enough to kill her. All right, it's your turn. What do you want to compete in? Embroidery? Playing the zither? No matter what you want to compete in, as long as you propose something you are good at. Since it's best 2 out of 3, we can give you a handicap. Wu Lin started to push again. Before the competition started, he could already see her being completely defeated. How could their little princess be humiliated like this? Compared to the anger of Huo Ling and the others, Chu Qingyin gave a happy laugh. She asked the silent Hong Jianhua on the side, I wonder what General Hong is good at? Hong Jianhua did not understand, but he still honestly replied, This old man likes to practice and has some skill in this field. General Hong is too modest. Your sand table practice is something no one here can compare to. Someone said with a smile. As soon as this was said, others quickly agreed. Chu Qingyin's eyes revealed a smile. She said to Xiao Su, Then for the last competition, this Chu proposes a military formation. When these words fell, the tent fell silent. No one spoke. In other words, they were all stunned by Chu Qingyin's shameless words. Hong Jianhua was also stunned. When he saw Chu Qingyin's smiling eyes, he felt that this brat was too arrogant. His heart turned cold as he cupped his hands and said, Then this old man will be bold enough to accept your challenge. I couldn't ask for more. Chu Qingyin replied with a smile. All right, these 3 competitions will be the content of the competition. The competition will be set for the day after tomorrow. Xiao Su looked over everyone and lightly said. No one had any objections. Wait. The clear voice sounded again. Chu Qingyin walked out under everyone's gaze. Seeing her, someone sneered, Could it be that you're afraid and want to go back on your word? Chu Qingyin raised her brows and smiled. What this Chu wants to say is that the stakes have not been set yet. Chapter 1398. Everyone finally reacted. They had been focused on the competition and had forgotten about this. Wu Lin was a straightforward person, so he immediately said in a fierce voice, If you lose, of course you will be punished according to the military rules. Especially for someone like you who disguised as a man to sneak into the army and even want to participate in the war. If you are not severely punished, it will be hard to convince the others. Although everyone felt that Wu Lin's words were a bit rough, it was more or less the same meaning. Chu Qingyin expressed that she had no objections. Then if I win, no matter what I do in the army, you cannot interfere. Of course, I will not do anything that will harm the interests of the army. When she said this, someone laughed out loud. Then we'll talk after you win, you brat who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. She did not waste time arguing and looked at Hong Jianhua, asking for his opinion. All right, it's a promise. Hong Jianhua did not feel that she could win, so he indifferently agreed to her bet. Chu Qingyin gave a clear laugh and cupped her hands to the generals present. Then when the time comes, I ask everyone not to go back on their words. Although only the 3 generals in front of her were punished for suing her, there were more than 3 people who were targeting her. When everyone saw her like this, they gave a snort and returned a bow. I'll let you be proud for now. Let's see how you'll cry and beg for mercy when the time comes. Some of the generals who had followed Chu Qingyin before had seen her methods. Their hearts were beating fast, and they were not as optimistic and confident as the others. She was a brave and resourceful general. Xiao Su saw that everyone had achieved their goal, so he waved his hand to have them leave. After a while, there was only Chu Qingyin, Hualing and the others left in the tent. Little princess consort, your performance just now made all of us sweat. Hualing exaggeratedly patted his chest, as if he was really scared. Chu Qingyan gave a soft laugh. Since she dared to say this, she naturally had a way to deal with it. All right, don't worry. I never fight an unprepared battle. Hearing her words, Hualing and the others let out a sigh of relief, and their lips curled up. They just knew that there was nothing the little princess consort couldn't do. You're too mischievous. At this moment, Xiao Su's cold voice sounded in the tent. Chu Qingyan's back was facing him at this moment. She pursed her lips and smiled. Her real trouble had just arrived. If she didn't deal with this leader, everything she had done would be for naught. She turned around and met his gaze. She took a few steps forward until she was a table away from him and had nowhere to go. Only then did she stop. She put her hands on the table and said seriously, "Am I messing around? I just want to use my own ability to solve my own problems. This isn't a difficult task. You don't have to do it yourself. I can help you solve it." Xiao Su pinched the space between his eyebrows. Looking at the little guy's disposition, he must have prepared a lot of words for him. As expected, because of their objections and doubts, you pulled out the leaders and gave them a beating. Is this the solution you're talking about? She questioned relentlessly. Killing the chicken to warn the monkey. Even if it can't block the mouths of the people, at least it can stop them from openly opposing. Xiao Su had his own ideas. This move was just a temporary response. He still had a backup plan, but before he could use it, the little guy had appeared on her own. However, her response today was similar to his idea. Chu Qingyan shook her head. Big ice block. What you're doing will only make people afraid of your majesty and not dare to mention it in public. However, there's no guarantee that they will talk about it in private. It will affect the morale of the army. The war is imminent. Hundreds of thousands of enemy troops are eyeing us covetously. Only by uniting can we resist the enemy. If we have internal strife, the people outside only need to make a move and we will be defeated. Xiao Su was silent. The little guy's words were not without reason. It was just that he was unwilling to let her come out and suffer such injustice. Seeing his silence, she knew that she had persuaded him. She immediately put in more effort and told him her thoughts. Big ice block, I know you're trying to protect me. However, this kind of protection is more likely to make those rumors true. People will think that I'm a femme fatale who only knows how to charm their generals. Why don't you let me walk out into the open and officially reveal my identity as Chu Qingyan? After all, didn't we agree that we would fight side by side? Then, all these troubles that will affect our progress must be resolved quickly. So, instead of blocking them, it's better to be open and honest. Let's lay out these problems openly and let me prove myself. Let them know that women are not as good as men. She was not a person who was overcautious. She would be affected by rumors and slanders. Doing things her own way was her real personality. However, if it affected the big ice blocks plan because of her, then she was willing to stand up and deal with these troubles. And this is an opportunity. I want to use this opportunity to gain a foothold in the army. I want to help you better. The moment her words fell, Xiao Su's expression couldn't help but soften. He reached out and lifted her onto his lap. Wrapping his arms around her waist, the corners of his lips rose. What a good better to be open than to be closed. Ian, you're making me look at you in a new light. How can there be weak soldiers by mighty Eagle's side? She smiled brightly at him. Now she was sure that she had successfully convinced him. Xiao Su smiled and shook his head. Saying so much because you're afraid that I'll interfere? Hearing this, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but glare at him. That's right. Who doesn't know that you have the most tricks up your sleeve? Although you agreed to my competition on the surface, if you want to interfere and make the competition fail, it's not like there's no other way, right? The moment she finished speaking, she felt her lips being lightly bitten. The main culprit raised his head and licked his lips. There was a deep smile in his eyes. Smart. Praising someone without giving a reward and asking for a reward is too much. She rolled her eyes at him in annoyance. Isn't this king your best reward? Xiao Su's face did not turn red as he asked back. Chu Qingyin's face turned red. This person was becoming more and more shameless. You're not serious at all. In front of my wife, what is there to be serious about? Aren't you treating me like an outsider? Xiao Su gently pecked her again with a happy smile. How could Chu Qingyin be the one to suffer a loss? When he came close again, she pulled down his neck and fiercely blocked him, taking the initiative. It was rare for this little fellow to take the initiative, so how could Xiao Su let her go? In an instant, the temperature in the tent rose, and the two of them were locked in a stalemate. Huo Ling and the others had unknowingly left and stood guard at the door, not letting anyone come close. After an unknown amount of time, Chu Qingyin leaned into his embrace and stared at him while panting. It looks like I'll really have to bear the crime of being a femme fatale. Originally, she just wanted to punish him and immediately leave, but who would have thought that he would not let her go? She could only bite the bullet and face him, but it was a pity that she ended up throwing away her helmet and armor. Xiao Su revealed an iron-blooded smile when he heard this. Only a useless person would be confused by beauty. I'm not that kind of person, so you don't need to feel this kind of burden. Chu Qingyin's lips curled up. This was her big ice block, so strong. She liked it. Chapter 1399. The news from Xiao Su's side quickly reached Xiao Ran's side. That's right, we have to disintegrate them from the inside. Even if Royal Brother lets Qingyin leave the army, the gap between him and the soldiers will still exist. There will no longer be no grudge in his heart. This step, Lord Yin, is brilliant. After Xiao Ran glanced at the contents of a letter, he smiled happily. Yanshi hurriedly cupped his hands and said modestly, Your Highness is too kind. However, if the King of England insists on keeping Miss Chu in the army, although it is not beneficial to us, as long as we instigate a little more, the morale of the army will be even more unstable. At that time, we will take advantage of the situation. No matter how powerful Miss Chu's beasts are, we will definitely be able to take them down with our manpower. The corners of Xiao Ran's eyes rose. Standing on the high mountain, he raised his hand and pressed down on his fluttering sleeves. His brows relaxed. Okay, let the army move forward secretly. They must arrive in 2 days. Yes. However, Xiao Ran did not receive the news that Chu Qingyin had challenged the soldiers, because the spies simply did not have time to deliver the news. Inside the tent, there was a person kneeling. Chu Qingyin drank her tea slowly, as if that person did not exist. Jean Xen, Su Yi, and the others were busy with their own matters and did not seem to notice the person kneeling. In this strange atmosphere, that person could not help but tremble and say, What do you want? This lowly one still has to go on patrol. Now that I've been caught by you, if the higher-ups can't find this lowly one, they will definitely say that this lowly one has neglected his duty. However, no one paid attention to him, as if he was talking to himself and singing a one-man show. The person continued to speak a few more times, but the effect was still the same. After a whole morning, he spoke until his mouth was dry, but no one took him seriously at all. That person clenched his fists as if he had been bullied. He raised his hand and angrily pointed at Chu Qingyin, who was sitting above him. With a righteous look, he said, Chu Qingyin, you're just His Highness woman. You don't have the right to arrest people. The rumors outside are indeed true. You're here to cause trouble for the army. I'm going to tell the soldiers to drive you out so that you won't cause trouble for the army and the general. Just as this person stood up and was about to leave, he was unexpectedly stopped by Su Yi and the others. He struggled with all his might and shouted, You're just a woman. You captured soldiers without permission and used lynchings. Where do you put the military rules? Where do you put the general? The general may have been deceived by you, but we won't. My death is nothing to be regretted, but there will always be someone to deal with you. This person was the captain of one of the battalions in the army. He was in charge of 200 men, and his name was Su Hu. When he was tired of shouting, Chu Qingyin closed the teacup lid and looked at him leisurely. Captain Su, you should be thirsty after talking so much, right? Come, drink some water to quench your thirst. You'll have the strength to shout a few more times later. Su had been observing her this entire time. When he saw her smiling at him, his heart trembled. What was this person planning? What do you mean by this? What could this Chu mean? I just want to ask Captain Su what you mean by this. This Chu has no enmity with you, so why are you slandering this Chu? Chu Qingyan appeared to be in a good mood. Su was shocked. Could it be that his actions had been exposed? I don't understand what you're talking about. Captain Su, are you planning to play dumb with this Chu? Chu Qingyan put down her teacup and stood up. She slowly walked towards him. What are you trying to do? I'm telling you, don't mess around. Otherwise, once I shout, you'll be punished by military law before you even need to compete with the others. Su saw her walking towards him with a smile and felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. He hurriedly spoke up. Chu Qingyan stopped 3 steps away from him. She smiled as if she was just catching up with an old friend. Just now, no one outside made a sound when you shouted until your throat was hoarse. Do you think shouting now will be of any use? Su finally understood why there was no sound when he shouted to attract the attention of the people outside. It turned out that this person had already set up a trap. He couldn't help but feel a little flustered. Captain Su, this Chu admires your talent. In just a few short days, you were able to disguise yourself as someone else without being discovered. Unfortunately, justice grinds slowly but surely. You still fell into this Chu's hands. Chu Qingyan turned around and walked towards the main seat. Su didn't expect to be exposed so quickly. He raised his hand and was about to slap Chu Qingyan's back when Su Yi, who had been watching him closely, raised his hand and chopped Su's shoulder. Su spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. He struggled to raise his head and saw Chu Qingyan's smiling face. His face instantly turned ashen. He didn't expect that after so many years of disguise, this would be the first time someone had seen through his disguise. Unwilling to accept this, he asked, "How did you see through me? You want to know? Then tell me what you know." Chu Qingyan sat back in her chair and looked down at him condescendingly. The smile on her face was no longer the same as before. Instead, there was a hint of coldness. "Don't you dare." As soon as he opened his mouth, Su stepped on his back, causing him so much pain that he couldn't continue. You didn't expect that the famous master of disguise, Liu Bai, would fall into my hands, right? Su, who was still struggling, looked at her in shock. His eyes were filled with fear. "How do you know that I am Liu Bai?" Ethereal, who was standing quietly at the side, stepped forward with a faint smile and tore off his human skin mask, revealing his original face. It was a delicate face that didn't match his burly appearance at all. You know how to take off my mask?" Liu Bai was so agitated that he couldn't speak clearly. Ethereal ignored him and returned to her original position. "Take him away for interrogation." Chu Qingyan saw that she had achieved her goal. She ignored the anger in Liu Bai's eyes and waved her hand to have someone take him away. She leaned back in her chair leisurely. Liu Bai was not satisfied. He wanted to say something, but his mouth was gagged and he was dragged away. After the tent returned to silence, Xi Ning, who was at the side, asked her master in confusion, "Master, you spent half a day just to expose his true identity? Why didn't you ask him why he became a spy?" Su Er, who was standing at the side, answered for his master with a smile. "Miss Xi Ning, you may not know this, but this man is a famous master of disguise in Jianghu. He is arrogant, and if you interrogate him directly, you won't be able to get anything out of him. However, he has always boasted that no one can see through his disguise. Master is taking advantage of this fact to set up today's trap. Once a person's proudest thing was destroyed, it would be much easier to interrogate him." Xining immediately understood. "Su Er, you are so smart." She then gave her mistress a thumbs up. "Mistress, you are so smart." At the side, Jean Xian's eyes fell on Xining and Su Er. He could not help but squint. Ethereal stood still and looked at the young princess, who was smiling sweetly. She admired her methods. However, Su Er was only half right. This kind of thing could be done by others, but the young princess did it herself. It was not that she did not believe in the ability of her subordinates, but this person spread rumors and hurt her mistress's dignity. The young princess had always been one who would not offend others if they did not offend her. But this time, her mistress was involved. The young princess had to personally avenge her mistress. A person was used to standing at the top. Once he was kicked down and the thing he was proud of was trampled under the feet of others, it was more painful than destroying the person. After a while, Su Air came in excitedly. Mistress, Liu Bai has confessed. Chu Qingyin smiled. Good. It was time to sow discord. Chapter 1400. Master, should we report to His Highness about Liu Bai? After reporting Liu Bai's confession, Su Yi asked seriously. Since yesterday, when he found out that someone was spreading rumors to slander His Highness and His Highness immediately ordered them to investigate thoroughly. As expected, someone was fanning the flames behind the scenes. Chu Qingyin propped up her chin in boredom and shook her index finger. Don't tell His Highness yet. He's been very busy recently. Don't let him worry about this kind of thing. Su Yi nodded. Then what should we do with Liu Bai? Keep him. I have a use for him. Her eyes darkened. She didn't think that the person behind this would be Xiao Ran. Every time he met her in Big Ice Cube, he was always gentle and cute. One day, he stood on the opposite side of them and cut off all familial ties. He was no longer gentle and kind. She pressed down the corners of her mouth and showed a touch of sadness. The beautiful memories of the past could only be buried in the depths of her mind. At this time, Xiao Su opened the curtain and walked in. Jean Xin and the others tactfully retreated. I heard that you caught someone today. Sitting down beside her, Xiao Su looked at her with a faint smile. There was no questioning or suspicion in his eyes, only honest trust. Chu Qingyin smiled and nodded without hesitation. The source of the rumors. Xiao Su's lips curved up with a faint smile. You can deal with it. I won't interfere. Chu Qingyin smiled brightly. Okay. One didn't ask, the other didn't say, but they trusted each other completely. Why are you suddenly here? Didn't Huling say that you had something urgent to deal with? Chu Qingyin poured him a glass of water and tilted her head. The bet with the generals of the army had spread like wildfire in the army. Although Big Ice Cube didn't care, she insisted on sleeping in a tent to avoid gossip. Of course, in order to make Big Ice Cube compromise, she paid a big price. Thinking about it now, she still felt hot all over. If I have to do everything personally in the army, then what's the use of having them? Xiao Su's voice suddenly became a little cold. Since the little fellow admitted that she was a woman dressed as a man, those old generals seemed to have made up their minds to pester him, trying to make him busy and unable to find her again. In the end, they were all quietly dealt with by him. However, there was no need to let the little fellow know about these things. She could hear the anger in Big Ice Cube's voice. It wasn't hard for her to guess that it had something to do with her. However, since Big Ice Cube didn't say anything, she didn't need to ask. If he wanted her to know, he would tell her. Chu Qingyin nodded in agreement. You're right. The battlefield is constantly changing. Even if you've made arrangements, there will be times when you'll need them to adapt to the situation. You're right. You're a war god, but you're not a god. They need their own abilities. Big Ice Cube's men were all not bad, and each of them had experienced hundreds of battles. However, when there was a strong backer, they would subconsciously rely on him. In fact, this was not good for the army. Seeing that the little fellow could understand the meaning of his words, Xiao Su felt a burst of joy in his heart. He raised his hand and pinched the soft flesh on her face. It was very smooth to the touch. About tomorrow's competition, do you have any questions? Big Ice Cube, are you opening the back door for me to cheat? She deliberately twisted his meaning and blinked at him. If you want to understand it that way, it's more or less the same. Xiao Su didn't feel that there was anything wrong with betraying his subordinates. Anyway, no matter how big the world was, it couldn't compare to the person in his arms. Chu Qingyin rolled her eyes at Jiang Yi, hugging just because he didn't like it. Xiao Su smiled. Sometimes, don't take fairness too seriously. How do you know that they didn't find someone else to ask about your ability? Chu Qingyin narrowed her eyes. Then, Big Ice Cube, please tell me more about their characteristics. What's in it for me? He lowered his head and looked at her, a deep smile in his eyes. Between the two of them, there was only a layer of mask, and their lips were just a hair's breadth away from touching. What do you think? She blushed and her heart raced, but she pretended to be calm. Xiao Su's lips hooked up, revealing a mysterious smile. In the middle of the night, a black shadow appeared in her tent. Looking at those eyes that were more beautiful than the stars, Chu Qingyan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What happened to the promised rest separately? She only heard the breath by her ear. This king is here to reap the benefits. Before she could react, she had already been pushed onto the bed. The night passed in silence. At daybreak, the entire army camp was especially lively, waiting for the competition at noon. During lunch, Mr. Chu, Mrs. Chu, and the others sat around the table and looked nervously at the main character of the day. Unfortunately, the main character didn't take himself seriously and focused on eating. From time to time, he would even feed the 4 animals at his feet. Kai, you'll be competing in a while. Are you confident? Mother Chu asked worriedly. Mother, I don't have the ability to do that. How would I dare to take on that porcelain task? Chu Qingyan replied with a smile. Although she said that, Mother Chu was still worried. Father Chu suddenly patted the back of his wife's hand and comforted her. Dan Yang, don't worry. Kai has my heroic spirit back in the day. She'll definitely beat those people to a pulp. Moreover, I'll cheer for her. When Mother Chu heard this, she didn't want to burden her daughter and lowered her head to eat. Xining was serving the dishes at the side. She pursed her lips as if she was being bullied. Master, are you really going to fight 1 against 3? Why don't we send the Howling Cheese Men up? I believe they're also first-class experts. Chu Qingyan had just finished eating and put down the bowl. She wiped her mouth and raised her brows at her little servant. What? You have confidence in Jean Xin, but not in me. You're not even married yet, but you're already siding with outsiders? When Xining heard this, she couldn't care less about what she had just asked. She glanced at Jean Xin, who was looking at her, and immediately covered her blushing cheeks. She stomped her feet at her master. Master, what nonsense are you saying? Then she ran out like a wisp of smoke. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips and couldn't help but laugh. Then she met the faint smile in Big Ice Cube's eyes. The competition would begin in an hour. Chu Qingyan planned to rest and recharge her energy for a while, but she was stopped by her father. Kai, Father believes in you. When the time comes, Father will stand at the side and cheer for you. I'll definitely drown out those brats' voices. Haha, I knew Father is the best. Chu Qingyan grinned at her father. She was touched by his encouragement, but she didn't take his solemn last sentence to heart. When she saw her father's lineup, she didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Noon arrived. Everyone had already arrived at the competition venue, the training grounds. I didn't expect you to really dare to come. Wu Lin saw Chu Qingyan appear and sneered coldly. Chu Qingyan shrugged. I didn't expect General Wu to also dare to come. An eye for an eye. Who didn't know how to return an eye for an eye? Wu Lin snorted. Only ignorant children would argue with each other. General Wu is right. She continued to reply indifferently. Wu Lin choked and left after saying, We'll see who's the real deal in the competition. Chu Qingyan didn't take him seriously at all. She smiled faintly and walked towards the competition stage. The sun hung high in the sky. The noisy training grounds were filled with soldiers. They had never seen Chu Qingyan before. At this moment, they only felt that the charming youth in red was so eye-catching. Chapter 1401. The competition stage was already surrounded by people. Chu Qingyan glanced around and saw that the generals she saw in the tent 2 days ago were all present. There were also some unfamiliar faces, but they all looked at her with unkind eyes. She never expected these people who lived in a patriarchal society to respect others, so she indifferently looked away and walked towards the small path that the crowd made for her. She can win with just her strength? Isn't that a joke? Don't look down on her. She once led a team to defeat the Prince of Nansong. That was the soldier's achievement. What does it have to do with her? I'll wait to see her crying and begging for mercy later. Chu Qingyan turned a deaf ear to these gossips. Jean Xin and the others who followed beside her silently, completely ignoring these people. When the time came, they wouldn't even have time to cry. There was no need to argue with them now. Is everyone here? Xiao Su sat on the judging platform. After his smiling gaze landed on the little fellow, he quickly glanced over at the others. Gao Hao stood up as the judge. Reporting to your highness, everyone is here. Chu Qingyin looked at the three people who stood up and couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. The opponent for the first round was a young general. It was the young general who was jumping around beside Hualing and Turin when Chu Qingyin returned a few days ago. Hualing whispered in her ear, "This person is Hua Yuan. His archery skills are superb. He can shoot a willow leaf from 100 steps away. People call him a divine archer." Chu Qingyin smiled. Big Ice Cube still had such an expert by his side. It was really a crouching tiger and hidden dragon. She nodded, indicating that she understood. After Gao Hao ordered people to prepare the target, he had the two people stand behind the yellow line. Chu Qingyin picked up the bow on the table and was adjusting it when suddenly a burst of noise came from not far away. Go Kai Kai. Kai Kai is invincible. Master's divine archery is unparalleled, invincible under the heavens. Chu Qingyin stiffened her neck and looked over. She had almost broken the bowstring in that fight. She saw her father wearing a cone-shaped headgear made of paper and holding colorful ribbons in his hand. He was directing the cheerleading team. The members of the cheerleading team were Glutinous Rice Ball, Su Yi, and the others. At this time, they were all expressionlessly wearing the same colorful headgear as their father. Then, they swayed left and right while shouting slogans. Seeing their master's gaze, the group of people looked back at her helplessly. It was the old man who held them back. Otherwise, they really didn't want to embarrass their master. One could only imagine how magnificent the scene of 3 snow wolves and more than 10 howling riders was. The crowd was shocked by this scene, and their gazes kept darting between Chu Qingyin and this group of people. Then, some people were dissatisfied with their noise and wanted to chase Father Chu and the others out. However, Snowflake Cake and the other two squatting on both sides slowly bared their fangs at the newcomers, and the crowd immediately dismissed the idea of going against them. Mr. Chu twisted his waist and waved his ribbon. He cast a smug look at his daughter and shouted even louder, "Mr. Chu Kai Kai, Su Yi and the others, invincible! Mr. Chu Kai Kai, Su Yi and the others, victory!" Chu Qingyin swallowed her saliva and turned around amidst the cheers. Then, she immediately picked up the arrow and took a deep breath. No. She had to end the competition as soon as possible. Originally, she had planned to take her time to deal with this Hua Yuan, but now it seemed that she had to do it quickly. Just like everyone else, Hua Yuan was shocked by Father Chu's display of power. Before he could regain his senses, someone cried out, "Triple shot, bullseye!" As soon as this was said, everyone immediately turned around and saw that Chu Qingyin's target had 3 arrows in the bullseye. At this time, she pulled the bowstring and released the 3 arrows. The 3 arrows flew through the air and steadily pierced the bullseye in the blink of an eye. In the noisy scene, only Mr. Chu and the others were left cheering even harder. Everyone else was stunned, and their jaws were about to drop. This was the first time they had seen someone shoot 3 consecutive shots, and with such accuracy. Hua Yuan, who was standing at the side, was completely frozen. He had completely forgotten to shoot an arrow because he had seen an even more frightening scene. There were only 4 arrows left. Chu Qingyin found it troublesome, so she took them all and loaded them all. "That's scary. She's going to shoot 4 consecutive shots?" someone exclaimed. However, before he could finish speaking, Chu Qingyin had already released the bowstring. All 3 arrows hit the bullseye. One of them penetrated the bullseye, and the other pierced the bullseye. The scene was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Is she still human? This is the first time I've seen someone so strong. That's so scary. Pinch me. Are you dreaming? While everyone was still in a daze, Chu Qingyin's father and the others burst out in cheers, breaking the silence of the scene. In an instant, everyone regained their senses and looked at Chu Qingyin in shock. It was as if she had 3 heads and 6 arms. Chu Qingyan threw the bow to the guard next to her. She wasn't affected by the crowd's cheers. She turned to the petrified Hua Yuan and smiled politely. Your turn. Hua Yuan looked at the youth who was smiling like a spring breeze, but was so terrifying. He swallowed his saliva and said, Hua Yuan admits defeat. He could guarantee that he would hit the bullseye every 10 times, but this person's strong archery skills made him admit defeat. Even if both of them hit the bullseye, he had to admit that in everyone's eyes, her archery skills were superior. Rather than wasting time competing, he might as well admit defeat. Chu Qingyan saw his sincere expression and couldn't help but smile. It seemed that although this archery genius was unyielding, he wasn't arrogant. Very good. She could let the ice cube nurture him more in the future. Gao Hao and the other generals finally regained their senses. Their gaze landed on Chu Qingyan as if they were looking at a monster. This person was so strong. Wu Lin and the others who disliked her stopped underestimating her. They no longer saw her as a weak girl, but as an opponent. Meanwhile, Hong Jianhua stroked his beard thoughtfully. Xiao Su wasn't surprised at the result of this competition at all. He waved his hand and ordered people to prepare for the second round. There was a quarter of an hour to rest. At this moment, Chu Qingyan walked to the ice cube and whispered, Can you ask Father and the others to withdraw? It was so lively that she wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. Xiao Su's eyes shone with a smile. Father-in-law has good intentions. As a son-in-law, I can't stop him. Chu Qingyan glared at him in annoyance. Then, under the referee's call, she leaped onto the arena. It was built temporarily, but it was very sturdy. Wu Lin was stopped by Hong Jianhua and was explaining something to him. He hadn't stepped onto the arena yet. Chu Qingyan wasn't in a hurry. She stood there elegantly with her hands behind her back. At the same time, Father Chu's cheerleaders had already occupied one side. They were cheering loudly and even singing a song. 1, 2, quick, quick, 1, 2, 3. Quick, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've waited so long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've waited so long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We've waited so long. Wax-gored skin, watermelon skin. Don't be shameless. Chu Qingyan's mouth twitched. This competition was too long. She had to end it quickly. Chapter 1402. Huoling stood beside his master and laughed. This subordinate didn't expect the old master to be so talented. Xiao Su smiled. Interesting. When Wu Lin heard the repeated cheers, he couldn't help but jump onto the martial arts stage with a dark face. Chu Qingyan looked at Wu Lin's face that was darker than the bottom of a pot and smiled. General Wu, please. Although Wu Lin had a straightforward personality, he wasn't reckless. He had seen Chu Qingyan hit all 10 arrows in 3 tries, and he didn't dare to look down on her. Especially after Hong Jianjun reminded him not to underestimate his opponent, he became even more cautious. Please. Wu Lin cupped his fist and returned the greeting. Wu Lin was dressed in short clothes that made it easier for him to move his limbs. He stood there, 8 feet tall, and had a strong body. One could feel the tension of his muscles under his clothes. On the other hand, Chu Qingyan was dressed normally. Her pure white clothes were covered with a red veil, which made her snow-white skin and red lips look even more gorgeous. However, her long hair was tied up high, and she had a faint smile on her face. Her eyes were gentle, and she looked more like a young master who didn't know much about the world. It was as if she wasn't here to compete, but to go sightseeing. Comparing the two, it was as if the outcome was already decided. However, when Wu Lin attacked, and she easily dodged, the crowd held their breaths. They didn't dare to look down on this girl anymore. How could they still dare to say that she was an idiot after seeing her archery skills? Chu Qingyan didn't pay attention to the others. Her eyes were fixed on Wu Lin in front of her. She saw that his breathing was calm, and his standing posture showed that his martial arts weren't weak. Moreover, he had been leading troops in battle for more than 10 years. He had experienced hundreds of battles, and his strength couldn't be underestimated. After exchanging a few blows, Wu Lin coldly looked at her. He couldn't help but admit that his internal energy wasn't as good as hers, but he had the upper hand in terms of strength. Although her martial arts were strong, she was still a girl. As long as he held her back and she weakened, he would be able to win. This was what General Hong had told him. At this time, the crowd outside the field saw that the two of them were locked in a fierce battle. They were also influenced by the Chu clan's cheerleaders, and they all joined in a cheer for them. In an instant, the atmosphere became very lively. After exchanging more than 50 moves with Wu Lin, Chu Qingyan was still at ease. She had already seen through Wu Lin's plan, but she didn't finish him off immediately. At least, she had to leave some face for Ice Cube. This person was his valiant general, and she couldn't lose too badly. After understanding this person's ability, Chu Qingyan suddenly changed her gentle fighting style and punched towards Wu Lin's face. Wu Lin immediately stretched out his hand to block, but he soon realized that this was just a feint. Her real purpose was, Chu Qingyan curled her lips into a smile. Her other hand quickly struck toward his chest. With a roundhouse kick, Wu Lin was like a kite with a broken string. He was easily kicked off the stage by her. This was terrifying. This Wu Lin was at least 200 pounds, and he was sent flying by her kick just like that. The crowd took a few steps back. This person was too terrifying. She was simply a smiling tiger. Chu Qingyan patted her clothes and smoothed out the wrinkles caused by the fight. Then, she slowly walked to the side of the stage and looked down at Wu Lin, who was lying on the ground. She smiled humbly and politely and cupped her hands. "Thank you for letting me win." Wu Lin didn't expect that he would be beaten by a woman to the point where he couldn't even defend himself. He had lost all his face, but he still stood up and swept away the contempt he had for her. He cupped his hands in shame and said, "Thank you for showing mercy." Although he was injured, it was all superficial. Her boxing skills were far above his, and it would be easy for her to finish him off. However, she didn't. Such a magnanimous person who didn't use her power to avenge private grudges. When he thought of what he had done to her before, he couldn't help but feel ashamed. "You're welcome." Chu Qingyan smiled faintly. Of course, she wouldn't injure or cripple him. Needless to say, Big Ice Cube's side was lacking in talents. Moreover, she had to maintain good relations with her colleagues. Otherwise, what if they were to cause trouble for her? She only took less than half an incense to finish the second round. This person's strength was terrifying. While everyone was still shocked that she had defeated the strongest man in their army, the Chu clan's cheerleaders came online again. Once Kai Kai makes a move, you'll know whether she's strong or not. Her boxing skills are unparalleled in the world. Chu Qingyan was just about to leave the stage gracefully when she heard this slogan. Her leg tilted, and she almost fell to the ground. The third round of the competition began very quickly. Marching and setting up formations was a simulation of a real battlefield. The two sides faced off to see who had the stronger combat ability. During this period, Chu Qingyan and Hong Jianhua each picked 500 soldiers from the army. Then, using the sand table as the battlefield, the two planned on the sand table while the soldiers fought on the training ground. Chu Qingyan walked to the place where the army gathered and chose the 500 people under Hua Yuan. Then, she walked back to the sand table and sat down. Hong Jianhua was originally worried that she would choose from the people he brought because Jin Xin and the others were all experts. They could at least fight 1 against 10. If they really went on the field, his people wouldn't be enough for them to kill. Seeing that she had finished choosing, he directly chose the people under his banner. Just now, His Highness had sent a message to him to use his own people. Doing so would make people think that he was bullying others. He was a proud person, but military orders were difficult to follow. The sand table was Hong Jianhua's strength. As soon as he sat down, his aura suddenly changed. He was calm and steady, making people feel intimidated. "Then I'll start first." Chu Qingyan waved a paper fan in one hand and a small flag in the other. She was very leisurely and looked more like a hedonistic sun than before, even though her real identity was a woman. She placed the small flag on the left side of the opponent's army and smiled. The first team take 100 people and attack directly from the left. On the other side of the sand table, Hong Jianhua quickly responded. Xiao Li, take 80 people with shields to defend and counterattack. Hong Sheng, take 50 archers to shoot forward. The two of them each occupied a corner of the high platform and didn't interfere with each other. No one knew what order the other gave. They could only see the reactions of their 500 soldiers. The height of the high platform was just enough to see the battle below clearly. The second team, take 100 soldiers to cover with shields. The third team, take 100 cavalry to flank from the right. No matter what move Chu Qingyan used, the opponent's defense was very good. Seeing that her people were blocked by the opponent with a small number of people, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but nod. This General Hong was indeed an expert, but this way, she could play a little longer. In the past, she only had the big ice cube to accompany her. She was always beaten to a pulp. This time she could fight back. After the two of them fought for a few rounds, Hong Jianhua suddenly felt a little lost. This person's fighting style was basically not according to the rules. His attitude was the same as hers. He did whatever he wanted, as if there was no strategy at all. He just let the soldiers attack wherever he wanted, just like a newbie. Hong Jianhua thought, could it be that this person didn't know how to fight at all? Because he had won 2 rounds, he had already won the bet, so he didn't care about the success or failure of this round. He looked suspiciously at the corner covered by the curtain and suddenly had a plan in his heart. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.